Or
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get our meeting started, everybody, if I can.
I love that voice. Look at that. Everybody.
Yeah, just right. Yeah. No one does that at work for me. So. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to our what is the month? It's March. Thursday, March 9th. Board of Regents for Washington State University. I'd like to welcome everybody here that's with us, and we are in the Tri-Cities at our amazing Tri-Cities campus. So wherever our Chancellor Haynes is, thank you for hosting us. And I want to announce that we are live via Zoom and over YouTube, and we do have two of our Regents Shetler and Regent Redmond, who are coming to us virtually and joining us. So hi, you guys. Good to see you both. So, and just before we jump into our executive committee, a couple of things that I wanted to do. First, we have a couple really important welcomes. Our first welcome is to our newest Regent, Regent Doug Pika. So Doug, welcome. We're very glad to have you here. Doug comes from being a graduate from WSU in 1974, the year of Expo in Spokane, Washington. Did you go to Expo then?
I did.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's nice.
And Doug and his wife Cassie have 4 kids. They live on Bainbridge Island, and they also have 6 grandchildren. And I think you have 2 more on the way.
We're growing.
Oh, that's very exciting. So we are really pleased to have you, and think that you will enjoy this group. We have some fun and try to bring a little levity to some big topics. So another welcome I would like to provide. We've gotten to speak with our new Executive Vice President of Finance and Administration, Leslie Brunelli. And Leslie is back here with us, but we haven't got to meet her in person. We've, I think, got to see her via the screen. So welcome.
Thank you.
And as we said to Leslie this morning, enjoy your meeting, the one meeting you might get to sit and observe. Just soak it all in, because it gets really fun from here on out. So. All right, well, we would be remiss to not do a couple of moments of just pausing and saying, how about those Lady Cougs and the Pac-12 tournament? So, huge congratulations to Coach Cammie and her entire coaching staff, and to really some amazing women that represented Washington State University, both on the court and off the court. They were just so impressive, and so their energy and enthusiasm, you could feel it coming through the TV. I'm a little irritated that we're actually not having a Regent meeting in Vegas right now. It seems like the appropriate place to be, as our men won last night and they play again today at 2:30. And Laura's asked that we conclude the meeting early. So Lisa might just be here on herself. Just talking. So good luck to our men. And then I just wanted to say I had an opportunity to attend 2 recent events on behalf of WSU. The first one was WSU's Night of Athletics in Spokane, Washington, which was a big fundraiser. And I know they hosted one in Seattle as well as one, I believe, in the Tri-Cities, and very successful. But I think that just an acknowledgement of Pat Chun and the amazing, unbelievable culture he has built within the athletic department, in particular with his coaches and the caliber of student athletes. But when you look at Coach Cammie and you look at Coach Kyle Smith, and you see Coach Dickert on social media, doing videos wishing the Lady Cougs luck. And you have your soccer team doing the same thing. You can just see a culture shift there that is really, really impressive. So that was a great night. And then I got to attend an alumni event with our alumni down in Scottsdale. And that was a really great event. Kirk and I were both there, and a really good turnout and a lot of engagement from people down there. So it was fun to go somewhere else other than kind of the Northwest to see Cougs in a different place. So all really good things and good momentum on behalf of WSU. So that's a little quick update from the chair here, if you will. And we are now going to move into our executive and Governance Committee. We have two things that I want to be able to talk about today. One is an information item, and it's really around the election of officers, and wanted to just take a moment and have a discussion around one, we are indeed seeking for opportunity around those that might be interested in a vice chair, those that might be interested in committee chair seats. And I wanted to do that today and give you all time to think about that, communicate that perhaps offline with myself and Kirk and Lisa. As Lisa will be our incoming chair at this time. She's got a couple more meetings. And just allow you guys time to think about that before we create a slate of officers and committee officers. So discussion point that I do think is important, and something that Lisa and Des and I have been talking quite a bit about, is just trying to get our arms around the when our terms began and when our terms end, and who's eligible for like the second term and whose term are you filling, and it's quite a puzzle, and I think we're getting our arms around that. But Des is going to provide you an up-to-date, and we will email that after this meeting, around where you're at in your term. We serve at the pleasure, obviously, of the governor and being appointed, and as well as reappointed. They are 6-year terms, and you can fill 2 consecutive 6-year terms, just for clarity on that. So an example in my case is I am actually fulfilling a 5-year term for an individual that was prior to me. And then I will be, if at the pleasure of the governor, if I was to be reappointed, I'm really lucky that I've got 12 more years. Oh my. So, wow, that's a long time. But that's you can kind of see that if you've stepped into someone's term, you're completing their term, and you still have eligibility for your own potential 2-year terms. That's not a given, because there is a reappointment process. So I share that with you as well, and we will give you that information. But the last thing too that I wanted to just put out on the table is that we have recently, in Brett's timing and my timing as chairs, extended the term of being the chair from 1 year to 2 years. That is not something we have written in our bylaws. That is not a must. It's not a Marty wants to do this type thing. This is it. Timing wise, it worked for Brett to serve 2 years, and then for me as well, giving Lisa some time through some of the things she was working through. 2 years certainly feels like it's a long time, but it also, I would say personally, and maybe Brett, you can speak to this, but when you think about it in terms of number of meetings, 1 year is about 4 meetings, and that's a lot of information to try to crank through in 4 meetings and then move on to the next chair. So there is some continuity there that I think allows a chair to kind of get their footing, as well as it allows our vice chair to get their footing around the finance side of things. And anyone who's been a chair recognizes that that is a really critical step, is doing the finance piece of it and getting your arms around the complexity of all the different components. So I would like to just have a discussion, of understanding what the board thinks about 1 year versus 2 year again, before we kind of go and look at another slate of what that, how people feel about that. We don't have to make a decision on that today, but just maybe a discussion.
Marty, I've been pushing for the 2-year term for a long time. I think it makes a lot of sense. Early in my tenure, I went to an Association for Governing Boards meeting, and the majority of the board people who are representing the boards or administration of colleges and universities indicated that they typically go either 2 or 3 years on their terms. And probably, I bet the average is probably in that 2 area. And I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense, because you basically, once you go through one cycle, you've just learned a lot as chair. And I just think it would be a benefit to serve that extra year.
I would echo that.
Thank you. Brett, their feelings.
I would just offer comments that
what Laura said was, I think everyone can agree with. We didn't rewrite bylaws, I think, to retain the flexibility that if someone thought 1 year was enough for them,
Right.
that it would just be easily dovetailed to the next past the gavel. So that would just be my comments.
Yeah. It's good feedback on the bylaws. In the bylaws, it states 1 year, but we have the flexibility, and I don't know if we necessarily need to go through the process of changing it and locking ourselves into that. But at the same time, it's a discussion, obviously, I think with each slate that you do, that we should just revisit the thought.
Well, can I just make another comment? I actually, and we can talk to our legal folks, I would actually tend to go the other direction and put, if we want 2 years to be the norm, to put 2 years in the bylaws, if somebody only wants to serve 1 year, that can be the exception. But I mean, I would push for 2 years being more
The standard.
what we do in the standard.
Regent Redmond.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Great. I think this is much more about what the organization needs than what an individual board member has capacity to do or wants to do. And I think we would be best to think about what's best for the organization as opposed to what an individual regent might want to do or have capacity to do. So I would be very much in favor of thinking about it in terms of what's best and putting that in the bylaws. And I completely agree that a term of 2 years is best for the organization. I think something as complex as this, particularly with most of us coming from non-academic backgrounds, is, really, it's really good to have that learning curve amortized over a longer period of time and to get the value of that learning curve, not to let somebody be, chair for life, because that's not healthy either, but really to have a 2-year term, I think is good. And I think most sophisticated nonprofits have found that having a longer tenure as chair is healthy, just because it allows, the team, the CEO in this case, president in this case, to get the most out of that chair relationship, not be doing the sort of the bringing people up to speed part for so long, but instead getting to reap the rewards of having that leadership partnership. So I think if there's a regent who cannot serve for 2 years, that's fine. They don't need to be chair. I mean, I'm one of those people who said, I can't do it. And that's fine because you can contribute in other ways. And so the idea that we need to sort of be flexible so that somebody can say, I just can't do it for 2 years. So, don't put it in the bylaws that it has to be 2 years is the wrong direction. So I'd be in favor of saying, nope, it's going to be 2 years because that's the best thing for the org.
Thank you, Heather. Other comments on this?
I agree with documenting the standard.
Okay.
And everything that Heather said with regards to the organization, because ultimately we're serving the entire of the system in the most effective way. So let's get it as a standard.
I agree. I think that the 2 years is a good thing because there's a lot to this. And I also agree with what Heather said, because I think that it should be the organization that comes first and the whole entire system. So,
Regent Chow.
I think I really appreciate the feedback. I think the organization needs stability. And that was how this really came to be when Brett was willing to say yes to 2 years, because I think the organization and the board needed the stability during COVID. And I don't know that that changes outside of COVID, but the organization still needs that stability and leadership. So I will say from my perspective, I wasn't willing to say yes with just 1 year in front of me with Marty. It wasn't enough time for me personally to feel like I had enough time on the finance committee and enough time on the board. Even though we both came on in 2018, it was also during a time where COVID hit and we just didn't have the same exposure, I think, to campuses and programs and students. And so I will just say that I'm so grateful to have had the 2 years as vice chair to actually feel ready to say yes. And it is a commitment. So we've done some planning personally and professionally to make sure I'm ready to say yes to a 2-year commitment in this volunteer capacity. So it takes planning, and it takes, if you're going to say yes, to be able to say yes to serve the organization. And so I just don't know that you do that without enough time to really consider it and understand the role. And Marty's been a tremendous leader in how she's led, which will probably be different than how I lead, and Brett and Laura in front of Marty and I. So I think our real emphasis needs to be, how do we build out who's next that can be moving through this process to feel ready and capable of really leaning in and being able to do the work.
Okay. Well, I think what we will do is, I'm just looking to Des, but I think then by the wisdom of the board, we will look to create a future action item as it pertains to a bylaw change. I'm hearing that we have some overall consensus on the 2-year. And with that in mind, then I just would ask that you really, each of you kind of think about where you would like to contribute. As you go forward, if there is a pathway, I recognize there might be some that are like, yeah, you know, the chairmanship could be a really interesting opportunity and for myself and the university, and I'd like to kind of consider that, but I'd like a runway of maybe 2 to 4 years around that. And so let's have those conversations too, so we can kind of get a bench, if you will, set up around succession and how we are kind of consistently being thoughtful in our succession planning around the board. So with that, nothing to do here, think about it. I will ensure that we get just an overview so you can understand the term piece of that. The one thing I will say that we just have to be, we will navigate, is there's term issues too when you do 2 years, right? It does start to get a little funky that in some cases it might be that you are not eligible because you have timed out, if you will. So we'll work through those things. It's why I think it's helpful to understand what the depth of our bench looks like and what our succession planning as a board looks like.
By the way, I might also mention that historically it's pretty unusual if somebody fills a partial term, which I did as well, and gets a second full year, a 6-year term, to be reappointed for a 3rd time. That's hasn't been the norm, at least in my experience.
Okay, that's good feedback. Yeah, and we will most likely have a different
And
governor.
actually, by the time you're through almost 2 full terms, it's sort of time to
Yeah,
go out in the sunset.
yeah, know when to go. Michael Jordan, for example.
Yeah.
Or Tom
Please leave
Brady,
your
really
audience
Tom Brady. I
anymore.
think Tom Brady's a better. Okay, all right, thank you for the discussion. Is everybody kind of comfortable with the next steps on that and the thought process around just what our potential slate will look like in the coming meetings? Okay, great. Thank you for the dialogue on that. Appreciate it. We do have one action item. And the action item at this time is, it's a provision or just a revision, excuse me, to the Board of Regent bylaws, where we are changing the Vice President of Finance and Administration title to Executive Vice President and Finance Administration. So that is the extent of it. And we will take a vote on that tomorrow in our meeting, but just a heads up to that, you guys. Well, that was the easiest executive and governance committee ever.
Thank you.
Right? So now we will be moving into our strategic and operational excellence committee with our chair of the committee, Regent Shetler. So I will turn it over to you at this time, John, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Marty, and welcome to everyone. Sorry that I can't be with you there today or tomorrow. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Board of Regents Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee meeting. It's just a friendly reminder that we are live over YouTube. Today, we're going to have one information item and two focus discussions. The first information item is faculty compensation, an overview and update. So I'd like to welcome Executive Vice President and Provost and Pullman Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton and Senior Vice President Provost Laura Greiner Hill to give our presentation. Thank you.
The middle one. Okay, clicker. Oh, thanks. All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This presentation really will be, I'm going to turn the mic over to Laura Greiner Hill, but just by way of introduction, faculty compensation is something that all universities pay a lot of attention to, and we've put a lot of work into addressing issues of faculty equity. We did a faculty equity study internally to look for equity differences within the university, but another important part of that is to compare ourselves to peers and understand really what the market forces are for us being able to recruit and retain excellent faculty. And so Laura is going to talk about an attempt to do that on our part. You have this in your board packets, and so some of the charts are going to look super tiny, which you can then expand on your computer and look at your leisure. I really just wanted Laura to give an overview to you in terms of what we did, what we learned, and how we're going to use the data going forward. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you and good morning. This is a brief presentation. It truly is an overview. If there are questions that this brings up, we can dig a little deeper. I want to thank Fran Hermanson and Rob Baker and Colleen McCracken for providing both the detail and the wonderful graphics that we're going to be looking at. These data.
That's the slide.
Okay. These data come from the Oregon State University, Oklahoma State University study of salaries from universities across the nation. We're going to be comparing today our salaries with our legislative peers, our 22 legislative peers. That information on who they are is in the packet. Our data set includes only tenure track faculty, and over the years, some universities have included what we call career track faculty. Others have only included tenure track faculty. So there's some, it's a little bit apples to oranges, but mostly apples to apples. All the faculty that go into this are full-time. Salaries are reported on a 9-month academic year basis for all WSU campuses. I already saw that. Okay. All right. The chart that we're going to look at in a couple minutes is complicated and has a lot of data in it. So I want to first orient you to what you'll be seeing. This is one college here, and it's shows you the dotted, the round circles with the full line is WSU. The dotted line up on top is the is our peer average.
What is the axis along the bottom?
The axis along the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's years. This is from data from 2014 through 2022. And then on the side, you'll see the average salaries. And this particular square is full rank professors. the bigger chart has associate and assistant professors as well. So what this tells you, and this is actually sort of the chart that looks the worst, the college and rank that looks the worst. There is a very large difference in the salaries that we pay our College of Business professors from the average of our peers. And this gap has been consistent and substantial over the years, averaging out at $60,000.
Can I ask, when you say peers, I'm sorry if I missed that. Who are peers? Who do we consider peers?
Our legislative peers, do you want, there are 22 of them, but do you want me to select some representatives?
Just, randomly, like, give me a
Yeah.
sense of, like, in the state of
Colorado
Washington.
State.
Okay,
Cornell, Iowa State, Kansas State, Louisiana, Purdue, Texas A&M. So they're all land grant, they're all APLU.
thank you.
This next slide shows both professors on top, associate professors in the middle, and assistant professors at the bottom. This is still just the Carson College of Business. And the y-axis is the salary amounts. So what we can see here is that the largest gap between WSU and peer salaries is found for professors. Associate professors in recent years in Carson have been on track with peers. The average gap over time has been 24,500 and has decreased substantially over the last 2 years. So we're doing well there. And the average gap for assistant professors has been 17,400 over the past 10 years. And that has remained pretty consistent. And we're a little closer to our peers at this point.
Can you define the differences between assistant, associate, and professor?
An assistant professor on the tenure track comes in and basically has 5 or 6 years to show that they can establish an independent program of scholarship or research or creative arts, whatever their discipline is, that they can make a difference in that discipline, that they can work on a sustained basis, and that they are a good investment for the university for the rest of their professional lives. And if they do that, they get granted tenure at the end of that first chunk of 6 years.
And promoted to associate. So associate professors are tenured. And then a full professor, typically 5 or more years after that, establish national and international reputation beyond that of achieving tenure. It's sort of a broadening scope of impact of one scholarship. So it's the highest rank, other than Regents professor, it's the highest rank that the university offers as full professor.
And is it customary to give a raise? I would think it would be when you're promoted, because what's confusing to me here is that basically the associate professors and full professors are basically earning this same
Yes.
salary on average.
Yeah, you get a 10% raise at each promotion. However, and what you've identified is what we're going to see on the bigger chart with all the colleges. As you go up, because of market demand and because we don't get a lot of cost of living increases, the salaries get compressed. So in general, in order to hire in Department X, a competitive candidate, you have to pay about, let's say, $100,000. Some full professors started at $45,000 a long time ago. They got increased 10% to, whatever that amounts to, and then another 10%. But that does not keep up with the market pressures so you get this big differential at the higher ranks.
There's no dollars to do the appropriate market adjustment and have parity across
Exactly.
those.
Exactly.
So is philanthropy on top of this? Is it supplemented by private gifts or any kind of?
Not typically, because these are base operating funds. So, if we were able to create an endowment that generated permanent established funds, we could of course use that to supplement faculty salaries, but that would be a very big number. Typically, the gifts that we have, I mean, if we set up an endowed chair, for example, that might be able to supplement salary, but in general, these are state funds that we use. I don't want to get too far off track from this particular study, but we are trying to use state funds, and we've established an equity process to make adjustments within ranks. So this is showing the average of all associate professors in Carson College, right? But within that, there might be disparity. As Laura pointed out, there might be someone who's been there longer, someone who was hired in at a higher rank, or for whatever reason got a retention offer because they had an offer from outside. So we're also trying to address equity issues within rank using state funds primarily.
We'll put you guys at a precarious position, because if I'm a professor, it almost seems like you're better off to move about. You're penalized for being almost loyal and consistent versus playing your peer institutions.
Right, and
Well, and I was going to say, just in general in academia, this is an issue because often the best way to stay where you are and get a raise is to get a competitive offer from somewhere else. And we don't want faculty, once you start seeing the grass is greener over there, sometimes it's hard then to reel them back. And
Yeah.
so we don't want to make faculty go on the market just simply to get a reasonable raise.
yeah, and the compression problem is a national problem. This isn't specific to WSU. Other questions on this? Okay, the next graph is big and complicated. Across the top are the 10 colleges, professors in the top row, associate professors and assistant professors. And these are ordered sort of in the biggest salary gaps are at the beginning of on the far left side, and as you go further right, they get lower. We get closer to our peers. And what you can see here is, again, in the first 5 colleges, I guess, the problem with the compression problem with professors, the biggest gap being with professors, is still there. The associate professors do a little better. The assistant professors do really well. On the right side of the chart, you can see that some colleges have better parity with our peers, and the assistant professors are doing really well in several of those colleges. Couple things to pay attention to. It looks like the College of Medicine is doing great compared to peers, but that's partly because we have small numbers of people in the different departments in the College of Medicine, and several of them have very high salaries, which skews the average. And also the SIP codes, which is the classification of instructional programs that is used nationally because programs have different names in different places, so they get a SIP code. In medicine, those have changed over the years, so that really is an apples to oranges comparison. Probably when I talked about it with Dean Record, he was kind of shocked. And the last one is the College of Communication, where it looks like we're also much better than our peers. They have very few full professors, and a couple of them have very big salaries. So that doesn't really reflect anything, except that there are a couple of big salaries who will retire in time, and will that big difference will close. Questions on this?
So that's why they have big salaries. They've been here a long time.
No, they have big salaries probably because they're in journalism and they got good offers from outside. So in several colleges where they can, they have opportunities to work in industry. Business is one, communication is one, engineering. The gap that we see between what we can offer and what industry can offer is big. So if we have people that we that are great, that we really want to retain, and they get an offer from outside, we try to match it. And so there are a couple of people like that in this pool, very small.
I'm actually surprised to see how low some of the, like in the assistant professor or associate, how low those salaries are. I mean, they can probably live in Pullman, but it's very surprisingly low.
Those are also 9 months.
Pardon me?
These are 9 month salaries, not 12.
Okay, even, yeah, okay.
So
that-
add another third, depending on if people get it through scholarship or summer teaching or things like that. So
Okay.
it's, one of the things we deal with in higher education, right, is everybody goes, oh, it'd be great to have a 3 month vacation. It's a reminder, nobody gets paid during that time. So generally faculty are earning money in alternative ways. And in the sciences and some of those areas, agriculture, those are easier because, there are more grant opportunities than there are in some of the other fields like the humanities and things where summer teaching may be the way that that's done. So yeah, just remember, these are not 12 month
Thank you,
salaries.
that helps, but it's still pretty low.
And these are not adjusted for cost of living, which is something that, when we are looking, when you're trying to hire a faculty member, you do consider that if you're wise, because, they may say, well, I got offered a position at NYU and it's, $80,000. It's like, well, yes, but you have to live in New York City. So,
Wow.
we often consider that, but that's not included in this data.
And you can see that those entering salaries that are low, that we offer assistant professors in some disciplines particularly, are on track with national averages, so. Judy?
From the department perspective, I feel like this is a big problem for our university. We're not getting our first choices when we try to hire because they're getting offered significantly higher salaries elsewhere. We're not retaining our best faculty because they're getting significantly higher offers elsewhere. This is something that over time is eroding our ability to attract and retain good faculty.
I was curious about, I know the scope of this was the salaries, but I was curious about the turnover. So when you start to look at the numbers and then maybe even a culture of, if I go get an offer, I might be able to achieve what I'm hoping for. Are we seeing a significant amount of turnover? Because that's got a cost to it as well, not to mention the cultural cost of having folks leave, which is not, again, part of this, but it makes me wonder what that impact is. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective too.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely collect that data, and I wonder whether we could get comparable data, because there's always some churn, especially at the assistant level, as people try to find their place where they feel like they want to play out their career. But it would be interesting to try to collect data, and we can certainly share that with you and share it with peers. I was actually surprised to see that we were on par for assistant professors because at least compared to some other universities I'm familiar with, they are relatively low. But
And at least in my department, we're struggling to make offers that are even halfway competitive with what they're getting offered from other places. I mean, it's really, we're off by 30 or 40,000 on our offers compared to other universities. So I was surprised too, because I thought we were.
Looking at these data, I would say hiring isn't as much of a problem as retention, especially at the highest rank. And we will be doing, starting next year, an exit and retention survey which is run through a program at Harvard School of Graduate Education, and we will be able to compare to our peers. And they look at not just who's leaving, but who was retained after getting an offer and who was proactively retained, because we can identify people who are real rising stars and at risk to leave and offer them something before they leave.
Is it because that there are other peer institutions, perhaps like a Purdue or a Cornell, where they have the endowment that they are able, I mean, because we can, look at this information all day long. There's a certain amount of money we get what we get from the state of Washington, right? And I think we all need to keep that in mind here. This isn't a private sector entity where we can go perhaps raise capital or whatever it is to adjust some of these things. So is that what are the tools missing to make us more competitive or at par with our peer institutions? Is that an endowment? What are those triggers that can help?
Certainly part of it is trying to find ways to put other costs onto endowments so that we have more state funds available for these kinds of things. But honestly, I think having a data-informed approach to looking at faculty salaries and especially at issues of faculty equity and salaries is something that I think will be critically important going forward. And it's something that we started this year and we intend to keep moving forward. We're working closely with the Faculty Senate on when there are state monies that come in, if we do get these raises, how will we divide it up between across the board raises, equity raises, merit raises, and really just being intentional as we do get dollars rather than just doing across the board all the time. Because if you do that, you're just keeping up with cost of living and you're not really going much farther than that. So a combination of seeking other sources of funds, but then also just keeping an eye on this data and tracking ourselves against our peers.
Oh, if I could too. Some of the disciplines, you have a better shot at doing, substantial endowments to support faculty salaries just based on where your alumni are coming out of and things like that. My previous two institutions, that was how we attacked this in business. The graphs look the same at my previous one and the one before that because of the same things. Somebody could come in at a wealthier institution, almost always get our great associate professors in business because they would offer so much more money. But a lot of times they did that because it was the Schultz chair that they also offered with it. It was a $5 million chair and they could take part of those proceeds and put it into the salary. And that was the way they did it. And if you look by college and we did number of endowed positions that just exist per college, you would find some of those numbers are really small. We haven't prioritized that in our fundraising moving forward. I'm not hacking on deans or anybody else. It's just, those are real opportunities. Engineering has a bunch and, there's some of the colleges that do have more. Arts and Sciences has, given the size of its college, a infinitesimally small number of these. So it almost doesn't give you the chance to do that. And I think in our next campaign that we're in now, I'd like to see us raise a lot more money. It's a tool. It's not the tool. It's a tool for your really high performers that gives them a prestigious title. But importantly, as you start seeing these salary things, it also gives them flexible dollars for research and allows them to complement and supplement their salary to make it much more competitive nationally. So some of our really top performers have those chairs all across the institution. And they really do. It does make a substantial difference in our ability to keep them. But it's an N of 1 or an N of 2, not an N of 15 that would actually really change a lot of these. So it's an opportunity and a tool.
And I guess base salary is one component of the compensation package. So I'd like to understand the greater package and what that means to be a state employee, because this conversation is prevalent across all of the public institutions. So to build on Marty's comment, it's really, what can we do to brainstorm or understand the best practices in those peer groups that actually, build more funds for endowments or whatever else. And we only know what we know. And I'd love to hear what those best practices are for retention strategies.
One thing really strikes me, and the coach survey that I referenced of exit and retention shows that money is not necessarily the main thing that keeps people at a university. Faculty work really hard and they like their work to be recognized, whether that's the service part of the mission, the teaching part of the mission, or the research and scholarship part of the mission. Adequate recognition can keep people somewhere. And I think one opportunity for endowments for people who can't endow an entire position would be for awards at the college level, which also helps build a bench for university level awards and then national level awards. And that really matters. And I know that President Schultz has been very intentional about really celebrating our faculty who are elected to the National Academy of Sciences. And I don't think many of them leave. I think that really makes a difference. So that's one thing I think we can do, and we're starting a program of more systematic identification of people who are very high performers, but who haven't been recognized, and helping them get a pathway towards national recognition. But endowments at the college level, I think, would be very helpful in some, especially in the arts and humanities for that.
Yeah, just.
Okay.
So to build on Regent Ramos and Regent McDonald's comments, I wondered if we could add another strategic thought level, just connecting dots. So if we're missing hiring the first choice in the labor pool for the teaching position, can anyone speak to, does that miss of the quality incoming faculty member? Does that cause us to miss academic ranking? And then does that help us miss prospective students? Because sometimes we drill down on enrollment, but if we're missing the boat on the quality education, are we missing that marketing component of an excellent product? If someone can go to school anywhere, is this one of the things we should be drilling down on more? Or is it because students can't afford to come, rather than a scattergun approach? I'm wondering what can we focus on to address, which is the higher concern, enrollment or pay, or how are they related, I guess is.
I mean, I would say, because we keep tabs with all of our deans on faculty hiring, it is not the case that we always lose our first choice. We could bring some data to really take a close look at that. I think in some departments and in some fields, yes, that is happening. And in other departments, not so much. We've been paying most attention to the cluster fire, and I think we've almost always gotten our first choice. A majority of those have been our first choice. So I think it depends on what you're searching for and what you're offering, not just in terms of salary, but in terms of the support that faculty would have for their scholarship and how much their scholarship is being valued by the university. But your point is valid that it's all part and parcel of the same thing. The faculty we recruit are that first line with our students for recruitment of students, for retention of students. You're going to hear in a minute from Saichiova about enrollment issues. Saichi is working with my team in the provost's office on a retention council, really taking a close look at how can we make sure that we're not just focusing on getting students to WSU and our 6 campuses, but what do we do to make sure they're successful and that they stay with us and they graduate with a degree. So I am aware that we just have 1.5 minutes left. The rest of your presentation, of Laura's presentation, is in your packet.
It's just one more graph, and I think it's pretty well described.
Should put that up there though, anyway.
Yeah.
This
It's a
is
great
by
snapshot.
college, and it's just 2022 to give you a snapshot of where we are right now. Each college is a different color. The heavily colored ones, the more saturated ones, are the professors. then assistant, associate professors, and then assistant. It's just a different visual of the last year of the previous graph.
It does make the point that full professors are where the strongest issues are.
Except for maybe the Enrique factor where everyone wants to be in the comms department.
Yeah.
You're a Hall of Famer.
Any, in 45 seconds, any
I
question?
would just remind the board, this is part of our discussion around compensation philosophy, development of a compensation philosophy. And, we talked about staff salaries and what we were sort of doing there with geography and things like that. This was the faculty part. And I don't want anybody to mistake us showing data and you go, well, what's the strategy? And I think that's got to be a part of it, but we wanted to get data. This is the first time I'm aware during my term as president, we've showed this data to the board. It's not that it's been hidden. It's just we have not had a way to do this in a full board setting this particular way. So the question is, what are your strategies around it? How are you identifying departments that are struggling with hiring? What are we going to try and do to move some of this up with philanthropy and state resources? For example, nursing, we're going and asking for a special allocation from the legislature to deal with some of our challenges in nursing. So there's a variety of strategies and levers we're pulling to try and address a lot of these issues.
Regent Shetler, this is your meeting, so I want to make sure that you have the space to kind of keep us moving.
No, well, thank you, Regent Shower, and I appreciate that. It's difficult for me to be able to direct traffic from remotely here from the screen because I can't see what folks want to do in terms of raising their hands or asking questions. So if there are no other questions about this topic, then we can move on to our other item. Can you?
There isn't any in the room. I don't know if you or Regent Redmond had any other comments or questions before we close this out. It doesn't, okay, doesn't look like you do. Okay.
No, and all I can say though, however, is that I think that we're quite aligned from the conversations that I heard in the room, or some of the ones that that I brought up during the pre-meeting that we had when we went over the materials. So I was happy to hear that some of the Regents' comments were aligned with the things that I had been thinking as well. It's good to see that we're aligned on that regard. So the next item is a focus discussion, and it's enrollment management update. And I'd like to introduce Vice President for Enrollment, Sachi Oba, who will give us our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. I'd like to talk about the women's basketball team. And literally, I was sharing this with Chancellor Haynes, and she said, "Say that, Saiji." So I missed the game. I was on a plane, but when I landed, I saw the score, and I texted Coach Etheridge, and congratulations, way to go. And I've been watching replays every morning of the game when I work out, but I always catch it about the last 3 minutes. And what strikes me about the last 3 minutes isn't the great play, isn't the great coaching. It's what the commentators are saying. And this is the parable, and parable is the word I want to use, right? Because there's a little of the divine in enrollment. And the commentators keep saying, 5 years ago, Coach Etheridge, 5 years ago, she started. 5 years ago, and look today at what she's done. And it dawned on me, that's what enrollment management is looking at. A multi-year, long-term, hard fight to get us back to where we want to be. And so I took great inspiration from that and from her. And we're about halfway through that fight, I would tell you. I wish we were further along, but we're about halfway. I'm also going to start with something that is not in the presentation. In the fall, I shared with you that higher education had lost about 1.3 million students. And I looked at that slide and I thought, I'm not going to add it to this presentation. It's old, it's dated. And then later on, I thought, I should have just looked for the current data and added it. I didn't, but I'll just tell you what the current data is. We've improved a little, the whole sector. it's now 1.23 million students are still missing from higher education. And context is important in this conversation. So here's where we are right now. We're about 6% down in the spring term from last year. So about 1,700 students. Not where we want to be, but we did see increases in first year and transfer students. And that's really important because we have not seen any increases in any term since the pandemic. And then finally, Chancellor Chilton, Provost Chilton, my boss under both hats, already started the retention discussion, which I am going to talk a little more about. We did really well with keeping our coups. So retention increased from fall to spring this year compared to last.
Before you go on, I just pause for just a minute. I mean, Saichi provided this data internally, and it was just sort of like, well, let's talk about the fall. And I was like, well, spring, first year students and transfer students went up year over year. So, you know, these things, we want to see a step increase, you know, at least I do, right? But the fact of the matter is we're starting to see that there's a clear corner being turned, and we're starting to see that stuff go back up. And I just, you can look, and I was unfortunate, the overall enrollment thing got all of publicity and not the fact that we're starting to see some changeover in the first year and transfer student thing. So if you go back to that slide, I just want people to pause just a minute. I'm a glass half full person, and I really think this is important as we look at what our fall is. You'll show us all this data and stuff, but I do feel we've turned the corner a bit on this, and we're starting to kind of move back up some. It's just slow. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's going to be gradual, but and our retention rates going up too by 6.6 is also really important. So there's some good stuff here, and I just don't want to blow through this so quickly to get to where we are right now in the fall. So
Thank you, President.
Yeah.
And the other comment that I would add to that is that's how returns happen in enrollment. It is by pieces and populations. It is not in total. So thank you for pointing that out.
I'll let you go. Sorry.
Here are the tensions that still surround our effort. The long tail of COVID is still with us. Think of this. Our first year class, so the seniors that are today, the class of 23, when they started high school, they experienced COVID-19 in the spring of their freshman year. They have had nothing but COVID influenced high school career. That's what they've been exposed to. Now, why it's important to us, we depend on 4 years of preparation to compete at WSU. These students coming to us in our first year class have known nothing but COVID-19. Rural residential universities have taken the longest to return to pre-pandemic enrollments. And rural and residential are really important terms here. Think about what happened during the pandemic. People didn't travel, they stayed home. That dynamic is still with us as we look at students who come to WSU. And then finally, in the Washington context, community and technical colleges, their full return is needed for our transfer population to sort of rebound. 80% of our transfer students are Washington residents. Most come from Washington Community College and technical colleges. We need them back fully operational so we can talk to those students. Now, what are we doing in face of all that? I'm going to talk about the Common App real quickly and tell you a little more about it when I show you some data. We launched that in the fall. It has been very successful at helping us increase applications and admissions. The reach of the Common App around the nation is really what's helped us with that. At one point, we had over 60% more applications from non-residents. Overall, we're up over 30% in applications. Affordability is the #1 question on the minds of families, and helping them understand that is really where we've devoted a lot of attention, a lot of resources. There is a new video that UCOM helped produce for our student financial services. We put it on their website. I encourage you to go to it and look at it. It's a great way for families to understand how they can afford their education and what tools are available. We've stepped up recruitment in neighboring states and our biggest feeders of non-resident students. And here's why. Since the pandemic, we've lost 40% of our first-year non-resident students. 39.5 is the actual percentage. That is a huge number that we need to sort of get beyond and help bring those students back. It's good for the diversity of our campus, and it helps with the bottom line in revenue. We started this guaranteed admissions program with other universities in the state about 2.5 years ago. It really sort of sputtered out after the first year. This last year, the director of admissions, Andrew Brewick at WSU Pullman, has really taken this on as a challenge. He's helping the other universities sort of come together and really build out this guaranteed admission program for high school students in Washington. And we feel better about it than we have in previous years. We've offered admission to about 8,000 high school students from around the state. So we're looking for that program to only increase in the coming years. Community college students, I already mentioned, to be healthy in our class size, we need about 800, 900 transfer students in that class. And so the best way to do that is to help them with the transition, help them with the transfer of credit, the application process. We're working with all the campuses and their partner community colleges to do that. The other thing that we know works is we bring students to our campuses. At Pullman, there are 6 different programs. We've already completed 3 of them. We have 3 more until the end of April. Tri-Cities has their program, I think March 18th. All the campuses have visit programs in the spring. Some of them are designed to help seniors that have already been admitted. Others are for underclass students to come in. We'll probably, at Pullman, probably pass about 17,000 visitors this year, which is right on track with last year's numbers as well. And then this last bullet I put here, if you're familiar with the WUE program, it helps students from around the region and western states attend other public universities in those states. Washington State expanded that program to include states other than the western states. And this past spring, former Vice President Pearson, Provost Chilton, and President Schultz helped us expand that program by allowing us to spend a little more money in those states, helping those students afford a WSU education. Okay, so here's some data. Now, I developed this almost 2 weeks ago. So the good news is the data's only improved. And I think this, if I'm reading this correctly, are the applications for the system, a really sort of robust effort. That's probably over 25,000 applications. Right now, it's over 27,000 applications, still well ahead of anything in the past. We feel really good about this. The Common App has led this charge. We have 2 applications running, just a little inside baseball here. One is the Common App, one is what we call our native app, which is a Slate application that we own and operate. But both of them have produced record number of applications to WSU, and this is system-wide. We've admitted more students than ever before. And when I created this slide, we were just over 20,000 and we celebrated. It's now over 21,000. So we're still celebrating. And again, the reach of the Common App helped us do this. I'm going to move on real quickly here. I want to save time for questions. When Regent Schottler had the pre-meeting, before I started to talk, he said, "Hey, Saichi, tell me what keeps you awake at night." And I said, "This is what keeps me awake at night. Our ability to improve our confirmations for fall 23. We do great with applications. We've done great with admissions. We are right now sort of flat with confirmations. And that is something that is a top of mind for all the team, improving confirmations. Students, if they don't confirm, we can't put them through orientation. They can't apply for housing. So it's a linchpin in their path to WSU. Everything we do is now focused on confirmations from now until fall. I already mentioned the admission and preview events. We know they help students confirm. We'll have thousands of students walk through campus, and we'll help some of them confirm at that time with their families. So that's why that's an important strategy for us. New Coug orientation, it's how we help students make the transition to being a Coug. We need all the students we can go through confirmation so we can get them into orientation. And then finally, if this presentation were 10, 15 years ago, I would tell you that there's a cycle in admissions and enrollment that would have allowed a downtime for enrollment management staffs. That time is gone. It's 50 to 52 weeks of current and continuous planning. And so we're already starting on 24, and everybody around the state is involved in that planning, whether it's campus or system-wide. And I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to stop here. I'm sure you have some questions.
What are the barriers to confirmation?
Right now, we have a $200 tuition deposit, advanced tuition deposit. We think there is some hesitancy about students paying that. And the reason, I shouldn't only point out that one fee. If you're a student applying to WSU, you pay an application fee. If you're admitted, you then have to pay a confirmation deposit. To go into new COOG orientation, there's another fee of about $250. And so there's this sort of maybe fatigue is setting in with students who now look at all those fees, and this is before they start with us. So it's a question we're looking at, we're studying. I think the other thing is it's very competitive. We know students who apply to WSU are applying on average to perhaps 4 or 5 other universities. And so it's a very competitive environment we find ourselves.
I have one other question. Last year, when you were looking at kind of this year, as far as enrollment was concerned, there was this, thought it was looking okay, and all of a sudden a drop, I guess, during the summer.
Yeah.
What happened there? What was, did you ever figure that out?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One of the ways we are collecting our data, we want to be really careful about how we're counting all the confirmations that come in, all the orientation numbers, all the housing numbers. There's a couple of things that we should sort of triangulate on, and all 3 of those are actually the ones that I'm talking about. And if there's sort of concurrence with students on those, the chance of them enrolling is very, very high. If you miss any one of those, the chance of them showing up as COOGs is lower. But I think we overestimated some of our numbers coming in late in the spring, and that caused us to sort of have a much more optimistic view of what fall would look like. That's why I actually mentioned what I did about what keeps me awake at night. We are taking a very conservative approach. The chancellors and the president heard almost 3 weeks ago from me that we're projecting flat enrollment, and it was a tough message to share with them, but I think it's the right message to share. We're still working hard. People are working hard, but we're cautiously optimistic this time around.
So this confirmation is key. And just what are some of your thoughts on how to change that, how to improve that?
One of our thoughts is actually to remove that confirmation fee. And I have to back up a little. The reason confirmation deposits are around is there is thinking that students need to have some skin in the game, a commitment to move on. And I don't doubt that in general, but I think one of the things that we're all grappling with in this industry is students think very differently about their higher education path and what they're doing. And I think we have not given enough credence to that new thinking. And so that's what we're trying to sort of bring into this equation now is how do students and families feel about confirmation deposits? Do they still do the same thing they did 10 years ago and 15 years ago? We're not so sure. So that's one way we're doing it. We believe that communication is, no matter what we do with the feed, how we talk about it is probably even more important. And so you're going to hear from Vice President Weiler, but his university and communications team have been really good at helping us use much more technology, much more social media, and getting our message out. And we think that's something else that we're going to have to sort of impress upon.
Those fees presumably come before students have access to their financial aid, right? So this is potentially up to $500 that students pay out of pocket, even if they would be someone who would qualify for significant assistance.
Do peer institutions do the confirmation fee? Is that
Yes.
pretty standard practice?
It is, we actually have a list of our peers, and there are some that have eliminated the confirmation deposit, but included it in their orientation fee. And if I could, your observation is one of the reasons we're looking at eliminating the fee, the advanced tuition deposit, confirmation deposit, because if we look at a fee for orientation, we can ask that be included in their financial aid total, and then they can use their financial aid to pay that. That's one of the reasons we're looking at that.
So a couple of things that I picked up on. I feel like if you look at the marketing funnel of the bottom of the pyramid is awareness, the middle of the pyramid is consideration, and the top of the pyramid is you can buy the product, right? And I think WSU probably, has been able to really ride the coattails of our brand on awareness in a massive, massive way. And then we get people through the funnel to the consideration place, and that feels really, really good. But really your marketing strategy and where we have not put resources financially is the moving through the funnel of consideration to buying or choosing WSU. Hence why I believe you're sitting on these. I think it's a component of your confirmation challenge is we're not helping them make that decision to buy. So is that a conversation? And I know Phil will be talking to us, but if you were to be approaching this from a private sector concept in the marketing world, that would be the audience that I would be slicing and dicing, trying to understand the sector of that. Like, who are they? Where do they live? What's their income? How many need financial aid? I mean, like you create a customized approach to that audience and then, vertical lines inside that audience of how you would go after that. So that instead of trying to spread peanut butter across, something maybe that you don't need to because you're getting a good funnel of consideration, how do you take finite resources and dollars into a very, very specific effort? And then the last thing I think that you said, and I think it's the story, is the story of affordability with excellence. So you can come and get this experience of excellence at Washington State University, but you can afford this. You can do this. And how we create that story, of which I know, again, that requires resources, and we will talk about that. But instead of trying to bite the whole apple, because it's a massive one when you think of the institution, in a short amount of time, if I have my marketing hat on, those are right where I would probably try to go to and lean into.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. And I wish I had a few of my teammates with me who are more vested in exactly what you described. So AVP Lewis, Director Chris you forget his name. They're doing exactly what you described. We actually just invested in a piece of software. It's called Market View that helps us actually slice and dice to the manner in which you just described it. So absolutely. The other thing that the Common App is displaying for you in sort of the application and the admission stages, the early stages, is that it is very emotional to apply to college. It is an emotional decision thousands of students make immediately. The decision to buy, as you call it, is not emotional at that point. It is much more cerebral, and that's the part that takes more resources and effort. Absolutely.
Brett.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. I did notice a communique go out regarding perhaps some financial assistance or forgiveness for out of state. Is that to non-resident? Is that to address your 39.5%?
It is. It was an expansion of the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And what we did is we expanded the pool of students that would be eligible. They still have to be admissible. They still have to have a minimum GPA. They still have to be competitive, but we're offering them a little more money to choose WSU. That's exactly what it was designed to do.
So that's positive news. The data that I'd be interested to compare is some peer data of similar challenges. Because my line of work, it's pretty common. Occasionally you have a year that's not so good. If I'm talking to my lender, if everyone else in my zip code had a year not so good, I'm fine. But if I'm the only one that's not meeting targets, then it's a tougher conversation. So are our peer universities struggling post-COVID like we are, or are some people we can compare to, are they doing better? And if so, not a criticism to anyone, but can we do better to match that or remain competitive? I don't see those comparisons.
We do have the data. In fact, market view is what helps us understand a broader sort of spectrum of what's happening in the marketplace. It's a much larger database that we now purchase. Locally or regionally, if we just looked in the state, I think you would say that other than the University of Washington, most of the other universities, public schools, sort of are on the same path that we've been on. The return has been pretty slow. They may have had a couple of bumps in particular populations, but overall, I mean, we're all kind of grinding along. We will get better. We will see things improve. The timing of it is what is probably the most difficult to stomach right now. If you're sitting in my chair, it's taking longer than I would have expected, and probably what most people would have expected. But we will get better. But we do have that data. In fact, we also shared, we asked institutional research to help us understand what's happened in the Pac-12 and in the region. And the data they shared confirmed what I said. It's some schools, and if you're highly selective and you have a much larger endowment, you're probably doing pretty good. If you are a public university, you're probably just grinding along as we are.
Judy.
I wanted to ask, we've talked a little bit about things like the $200 fee and group orientation. Are there other things that we would want to do with our students anyhow, such as, my understanding is, for example, that we don't open the registration system up to our students until they're in group orientation. Are there other things that we could do that get students engaged much earlier in all the exciting things they can come and be involved in at WSU that we're going to do anyhow? But if we could move them a little earlier, would certainly help from the planning side, from department side, that would help a lot, but also from maybe a recruitment side of, hey, if you're going to come to us, this is what your first year might look like. These are the courses you can choose from. These are the clubs you can get involved in. Is there some more stuff like that that we could get out to students before new group orientation? Because it feels to me like there's just a lot left to NCO. And if we could get it out sooner, since we're doing it anyhow, right? Yeah. It might help us at that commitment retention of the commitment stage.
Absolutely. In fact, you just described exactly what happens in those admission events throughout spring. There are departments, clubs, faculty and staff that help us talk to the 1,000+ visitors with their families about everything that you just described. Can we do it in a more virtual manner? Perhaps, maybe that's something to look at. But that's exactly what we're trying to do, is engender that excitement to become a coup and transition into the confirmation. But, I think one of the things that we took away from the pandemic was virtual helped, but it didn't replace some of the activities that we know work really well. And one of them is getting coups to campus, whatever campus. But I think your comment is well made, that perhaps there are things we need to look at that do incorporate a little more virtual reality to help students maybe even before our visits.
Thank you.
Enrique.
Yeah. Two things. You mentioned something about that students now are kind of looking at things differently as they're trying to make their decision. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, as to what that is, and I'm wondering if the question about even going to college is part of that. And then the other thing I was wondering is, what's the impact of FAFSA as far as, because that's such an ordeal for parents to have to deal with.
Absolutely. the comments I was alluding to, or my comments about the behavior, it does stem from the question of, is college still for me? Do families still want to invest? That, I think you have to start with that, because that's been called into question even prior to the pandemic. And then that sort of thinking and family thought process only was exacerbated during the pandemic. That's still with us. Here's how it manifests itself in the behavior of our students. They are taking longer to make decisions that they would have made pre-pandemic by now. Confirming, applying, accepting their admission. I mean, all those things have been pushed out by months. And we have had to respond, not just WSU, the industry's had to respond by moving our deadlines further and further to accommodate this sort of very slow roll and slow uptake of students. But their behavior has changed pretty dramatically. But I think the big question of people questioning whether or not to send their child to four-year universities or to college in general sort of is the base of that. But how it manifests itself is we are spending a lot of time talking to students more than once, sending information to them more than once, and their decision process doesn't speed up. It's still where it is.
Is the bottom line their money and affordability or what?
As odd as this is going to sound, I don't think it's money. I think it is a decision and a conversation that is almost stymied maybe in some families. I don't think it's simply money. I think the decision to go to college is far more complex than do we have enough money. So that you mentioned the FAFSA. I know I'm going to be up here talking a little about FAFSA. I'll just jump to the good news. The state of Washington has seen a 9% increase in students filing a FAFSA this year. It's up about 35%, right? There's about 88,000 high school seniors. 35% of them have already applied for FAFSA. That's really good news. The best states in the country are about 60%.
I just want to, Sachi, compliment you on all the work that you've done and President Schultz, because I think I remember the day you started and we didn't have an enrollment focus or an investment in this space. So we're learning with you. And if there's something that we can do as Regents to help, please articulate that directly so that, you can activate us and not just, give you the line of inquiry. That would be helpful for my standpoint.
Thank you.
I like to say the same thing and agree totally with what you said. As someone who's Latino, we have a large Latino population. We're in a place right now where you have a large Latino population. And if there's anything I can do to go out to the community, tell me when, tell me what. I mean, I'm a retired guy now, so I got time. And I'd be happy to, particularly here, I mean, I got cousins here, I can.
Just in his family, he could get raised tuition.
We show up, we're an economic stimulus. No, I'm very serious about that, because that to me is why I'm here and why I want to be a part of this, because it's my university, but I want to know how I can help. So.
Thank you. Regent, I remember my first day too. And thank you for sharing that, both of you. I would also share this. Both Kirk and Elizabeth are always complimentary of me because I'm in meetings with them. But it's really everybody who's standing in front of me, right? All of the admissions people, all the faculty and staff. I'm just the lucky one that gets to talk to Kirk and Elizabeth all the time, but it's really all the effort they do that is helping us sort of get back to where we want to be.
I have a question around student experience and how you're looking at that data, and because I know we have, and we're looking at this, but for a student who perhaps is sitting in your consideration bucket and they've come to Pullman, it's been a sunny day, it's been very fun, and they maybe have visited Strike Parent and go, okay, well, not ideal, but freshman year I can pull that off. then they go visit their other school that they're in line for consideration. And that physical living experience could feel very different. And so how are we understanding the data around what our actual student experience around dining and living? Because those for an 18-year-old, kids are making decisions based on that, right? I mean, I've had 3 kids that have, ruled schools out based on what the cafeteria felt like, or, wow, I'm not sure I want to sleep on a wooden bunk bed that you're assembling yourself. So just what is that? And do we have that data? How are we looking at student experience as we wrap it into messaging of affordability and excellence?
It's an important question. Our partners in student affairs, and I know you're going to hear from Dr. Taylor a little later, but we work closely with them specifically on the visit programs and our campus visits to help us put our best foot forward. And I would tell you there are challenges. I mean, we do have some facilities that are older, and we have to keep them up to help our students understand sort of what the potential of their living and their dining arrangements will be. We have not undertaken, at least through enrollment management, I will admit to this fault here, we have not undertaken a direct survey of that particular part of the experience, the dining, and when they visit a residence hall. We do ask them about the visit program, who they meet with and the faculty, how the panel conversations or the campus tours go. And we do receive feedback that it's typically very high, scores very high. But in particular of when they visit a residence hall, I don't believe we've asked that yet. But my sense is that we could probably incorporate that into future visits, and it would help us understand sort of how they
think. The Regents too, right? Understand where we should be putting some support. And around the student experience, because there's nothing worse than perhaps visiting Wilmer Davis, and that's what your visual is, and you show up and you're perhaps not at Wilmer Davis and you're somewhere else, and on that first day of move-in, that's a pretty impactful moment of, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, right? I mean, and then you have parents that are kind of carrying a message and a story that maybe works negatively towards our efforts.
I would agree.
Heather, your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. Super interesting discussion, and I just had sort of a larger comment / question that maybe takes it up to the larger strategic framework. I keep thinking about some of the discussions we've had in the past about how our student today is a much more diverse student than in the past. And I think maybe it was the last time we were at the Tri-Cities that we talked about how so many of our students need to have a pretty multifaceted life during their time at WSU, and often live at home or need to live very close to their family of origin and hold down a job, sometimes have kids of their own, but have a lot of family responsibilities at a minimum, and may need to just be very close to their family of origin in order to make it all work, so to speak, and to achieve their college goals. And so I was thinking about that and thinking about our multi-campus footprint now, and some of the campuses that we might consider in the future. And the enrollment conundrum, and of course the legacy capital that we've got in some of our existing campuses, especially Pullman, and some of the issues that Marty was just highlighting with some of the maintenance and just deferred maintenance issues that we've got with some of that space and the attractiveness that it has, particularly to those more traditional students who are going to be residential and want to have that sort of traditional brick and mortar experience. And I'm just thinking, if as we think about enrollment, not for the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, but longer term, if we really need to step back and kind of map more strategically where we think our students are going to come from a, you know, a more holistic demographic standpoint, and how to tailor our offering to their specific desires. Because it may be that we are, you know, going to be keeping Pullman as it is and making it bigger and better, or, you know, smaller and better, or I don't know. But I think it's a question. And of course, you know, sitting in Seattle as I do, I always think, you know, how many students decide not to attend WSU because it's not urban enough or not close enough to their family of origin that happens to be in Seattle. And Everett addresses that to some degree because it is, you know, close enough. But, you know, you look at the success that UW has had with the Tacoma campus, for example, and you think, well, maybe Seattle wasn't close enough for some students. And so Tacoma, you know, really worked better for some of their students. So it's just a kind of opening up of the aperture as we think longer term about this, and you know, kind of questioning whether we're thinking about it more as we think about it more of how do we fill the buckets that we have. But maybe we need to think about it a little bit more, you know, going back to John Shetler's long history of Amazon, a little bit more from the customer standpoint of who are those customers going to be, who are those students going to be in the long run, and what do we, you know, do we have the right offerings for them? And how do we morph what we have given the, you know, the sunk capital that we've got in the resources that we've already built up over our long history to meet that need over time. And I bet that is in the strategic plan somewhere, but I'd like to see us focus on it a bit more in the enrollment discussion.
Well, and thank you, Heather, for those comments. And I think it's almost a nice segue into our next section. I'm not trying to rush things along. I just want to make a comment, and then we can go back to other questions or comments for Sachi. But I do think that WSU, and my perspective, we think about recruitment and retention and employees at Amazon. We do that based on the work that we do here, and that we really do exciting work. And where else, anywhere on the planet, do you get to work on these kind of projects? So we entice employees who want to come to work for us, wherever we happen to be located anywhere in the world. And I think that it has a lot to do with how you tell your story. I said, since I've been a regent now for the last several years, I think WSU is one of the best kept secrets in the region, if not on the planet. And I do think that we need, as we think about our communications, which Phil is going to talk about next, how do we get our story out there? How do we entice and get students and prospective students really super excited about coming to WSU because of the type of opportunities that we provide that they would not otherwise get at other universities? And so I think it's a multi-pronged approach, but I think it's going to take a really solid and communications plan to get that word out there. There's so much incredible work that's being done, and it's just, unless you're really close to it, you just don't know about it. So I want to ask, and again, hard for me to direct traffic because all I see on the screen right now is Sachi, Heather, and myself. But are there any other comments, questions for Sachi before we go on to Phil's presentation?
I have one other question. Thank you. I'm looking at the slide that talks about new admitted.
You might need to speak up just a little bit.
Oh, looking at the percentage of applicants admitted slide. First of all, I will say I'm not someone who thinks we need to gatekeep higher education, so it doesn't necessarily concern me that we're admitting at such a high level. But I am wondering if we have a sense of how that percentage of admitted applicants affects the perception of the quality of the education we're providing. And it's sort of a two-part. Is it that new applicant or prospective students are more prepared for college, and that's why that number has gone up, or do you have a sense of that?
So the first part, I'm wondering if you were asking, is our percentage of admits so high that that dissuades some applicants. I don't know that for sure. You have to be prepared well to be admitted to Washington State. In Pullman, there is a GPA that's a little higher, but overall, we ask students to be well prepared to take on a WSU education. I don't think that impacts us terribly. I would tell you that the number of admits being higher, it's because of the reach of the Common App. And so there are literally thousands of more applicants that are eligible for admission through that. And so we didn't depress our standards to increase that number. We have a lot of people who are well prepared, and that's why we've admitted them.
I have a follow-up question. I'm glad that you asked that question because I was also wondering about that. Are you seeing with the use of the Common App, perhaps any increase in students of color?
The same question came up yesterday with Student Affairs. Probably not well known is the Common App has a very generous waiver program that you have to adhere to if you want to be a participant. So if a student says, look, I can't afford the application fee, it's essentially done. You waive it and let them come in. And it's specifically to help more populations that typically don't apply to college. And so we won't have our final report until the fall, but I think I had an update from the Director of Admissions who said there is no appreciable loss of students of color coming through the applicant pool. So if anything, it's probably going to increase because of the reach.
Well, and I would imagine the fees associated with applying to multiple schools continues to be a barrier. And so if you're able to apply and have greater reach, you also should be able to have greater possibilities. And so to me, it seems like that's got to be part of that solution to helping meet that need there too.
We hope so too.
Okay, anybody Kirk, and then John, we'll turn it back to you.
You recently reached out to, as we talk about trying to get the confirmation number up. You all reached out to admitted Cougs to do one-on-one types of things with people. I think that's also telling, and you didn't mention that. I'd like you to do that, and then I'll have a concluding comment.
Yeah, I think we sent out texts and emails and communicated with well over 12,000 incoming students. And we said, look, whatever we can do to help you, if you'd like to talk with us one-on-one, and something like within 48 hours, there were probably 1,000 students who said, this was 2 weeks ago, who said, yes, one-on-one, please call me or text me and let's set that up. I probably should have got the most recent number, but that tells us a lot. It tells us a couple of things. One, students are very interested. Two, this is a different way of communicating at this point in the funnel. They're still wanting one-on-one conversations with admissions counselors, financial aid people. That's a different way of doing business than even prior to the pandemic. And so I think it bodes well for us. It's a lot of work on the staff and the teams, but they carry on. They do it really well.
I would just compliment Saichi and our teams on all of our campuses for the work that they're doing. Everybody intensely feels this pressure. I'm glad the board has asked good questions. We're asking those internally. We went to Saichi and his team in January and said, if there was investment dollars right now today to help that fall class, where would they be? He came back with probably $700,000, $800,000 investment. We said yes. And so they were able to hire some people and do some things. So we are continuing to strategically invest to try and make sure that we have this going. So I appreciate the questions. I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of people feeling a lot of pressure and working really hard to try and make sure that we see that positive momentum going into the fall. And the other thing that gets lost is sometimes we're doing a lot of new stuff that we didn't do last year and the year before. And it's not just let's do everything the same and hope that we get a different result. There's a lot of creativity going into this as well. And I appreciate all the things that Regents brought up that we can take into account. But there's a lot of new stuff happening, and we're going to continue to learn and change each year to try and make sure that we're competitive in a highly competitive environment. So So thank you. Keep up the good work. And I know I speak for everybody here. We need to continue to communicate that to the student affairs, the people doing campus tours. I mean, it's a team effort and it is making a difference.
Thank you.
Just one more thing, Chancellor Schultz.
Just wanted to make one comment that you all know we're a member of the National Association of System Heads. Kirk represents as the system president, and I'm there as the chief academic officer. And this is a national conversation. In fact, their campaign is college is worth it, because the issue really is that young people are not seeing this as a good return on investment. And so I think if you can help us get the word out about the value of a college education, that's a huge part of the battle, right? Because they can't even they're aware of us, but the question is it worth buying that thing? And so, to put it crassly, so I just wanted to put that out there too, that there's a national campaign that we're a part of. I forget how many institutions, 60 or more systems who are engaged in trying to make this change and communicate the value of college. So thank you, Sachi.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and excellent presentation. John, we'll turn it back to you now.
Thank you, Chair Dickinson, and thank you, Sachi and President Schultz and everyone else for your thoughtful comments. As I think it was a very informative presentation, and we look forward to updates in the future.
There's just a request here in the room that we maybe take just a 10-minute break. Does that work okay? That we could reconvene at 11:50 or 10:55.
Certainly.
That work? Okay, everybody 10 minutes and give Phil a chance to get up here. And thanks, everyone.
Talking about lunch.
Well, what I want to do is
A week goes by. She's got some on car. So. So I'm dependent on her. Yeah, so she came over last night. And then I had dinner with,
We do.
So if they're waiting on blood pressure, we're gonna do a GI.
You ready for us?
That's good.
You know when you're ready.
I can't hear you.
Are you ready for us to go?
Yeah.
We are live. Thank you. Okay, we are reconvening. And if you're just joining us, we are in the portion of our Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee. Regent Shetler, I will turn it back to you for our next portion.
Thank you, Regent Dickinson. And now I'd like to introduce our next and final discussion item, which is Marketing and Communications Update. So I'd like to welcome Vice President for Marketing and Communications, Phil Whaler, to present to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you, and particularly to be able to follow what Saichi was just discussing, because there's actually quite a bit of overlap and sort of threads that I'm going to pull on that he shared. And one of the things the president mentioned as well is this idea that we recognize that we needed to make investments and we needed to take that money and put it to use immediately. And so the purpose of my conversation today is to really talk about some investments that the president has made in marketing in particular, and how we're putting that money to use immediately so we can address particularly issues around student enrollment. So as I said, the timing is really good. I want to make sure we allow plenty of opportunity for us to have discussion in the past, or in the end. And I will just remind everybody that we started this conversation as a group back in January of 2022. And at that time, sort of the main takeaway was we talked about different types of communications. We talked about the idea of earned media, which would be WSU's ability to get stories about the institution in the news media. We talked about owned media, that would be the WSU website, would be our WSU Insider, which is our daily news and information site. We have blogs, we have newsletters. There's a variety of ways we control the message directly. Also talked a little bit about shared media. That would be content that we post on social media, and then our followers organically share it within their own networks. But the one place that we put a lot of attention on back in January of 2022 was this idea of paid media, and the fact that WSU has not really been in a position to be able to provide ongoing funding for paid media really for about 15 years. We'll go back into that a little bit more detail, but really the focus was on media and marketing in particular. So when we met in May, I mentioned that President Schultz had allocated $350,000 in one-time funding, which was fantastic. And that money was going to allow us to essentially lay the groundwork to relaunch WSU's marketing program, which, as I said, had really laid dormant for quite a long time. Today, I want to talk a little bit about some additional funding the president's made available since that meeting that we had in May. We'll talk about how that money's being put to use. But before that, Saichi shared with you a parable, I think is what he called it. I'm going to share with you a little bit of a metaphor for this idea of the WSU brand. I'm going to talk a lot about the importance of our brand. Sometimes it's hard to kind of wrap your head around what does that mean? What is when we talk about a brand? Some people think of a brand as, you know, the logo you might have on your lapel pin. I'm talking about WSU's brand, its reputation much more broadly. And the metaphor I want to use is the roof on your house. You have a roof on your house, it protects you, keeps you dry, keeps you safe and warm. This isn't a great metaphor. I'm stretching it a little bit because a brand is much more than something that just sits over your organization. It actually attracts people to your organization. But a roof needs to be maintained. If you stop maintaining your roof, you're going to develop leaks. And you might be able to go a couple of years without some routine maintenance, but over time, those leaks are going to get worse. And particularly when the winds start blowing and storms hit your house, that's when you really start to see the fact that you have not maintained that roof. And so that's kind of where we are at WSU with regard to our brand. So the winds that we're facing, these headwinds, are things we were just talking about. We see, our research is very clear that students and parents are questioning the value of a four-year degree. And those are at higher rates than we've really ever seen before. So there's a fundamental question about, is it worth my student spending 4 years to earn a degree? What they get out at the end, is that going to be more valuable than just having to go to work directly? Another headwind we're facing is this question about affordability. Again, something that we talked about. Affordability is a real concern for us as a sector. Again, the research across the country is very clear that they're not assuming that a four-year degree is necessarily going to make you better off than you would if you did not complete that degree. And Chancellor and Provost Chilton talked about the National Association of System Heads and the work that that organization is doing to address these questions really head on around value and affordability. So we'll talk a little bit in a moment about the work that we're doing to really try and buck those headwinds. So we've got headwinds as a system, but we also have some storms that we're dealing with that are unique to WSU. We had 2 unfortunate student deaths on campus in the last several months. We had a football coach who decided not to be vaccinated, and that really resulted in some negative national headlines for the institution. And of course, we know we had a student who was arrested for a really heinous, or accused of a heinous crime. So we've got those headwinds, we've got those storms, and our roof is starting to leak. I think we're seeing that. I think you can argue that one of the issues that we faced around enrollment is we've not talked about the WSU story in a very long time. We've not paid to deliver that message to prospective students and their parents. The other thing that was showing up is there's concern about WSU's rankings and our reputation. And again, you need to maintain that brand, you need to maintain that roof over your house in order to be prepared for the headwinds and the storms that might come and hit you. So enough with the metaphor. I think you get the idea. But I guess one last thing, if you do have a leaky roof, what do? There's 2 things you do. One is you immediately effect emergency repairs. The second thing you do is you find a good contractor and you replace your roof. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the immediate efforts that we've been.
Some of us just put a bucket under.
Well, sometimes you pull out the blue tarps. So we've got some blue tarps we're pulling out. We also have some emergency repairs. But yeah, I think we'll talk about, again, to extend the metaphor, how are we dealing with these issues that we're facing right now in the moment, and then how are we going to deal with them over the longer term? So we go to the first slide. just a quick recap, as I mentioned, in April of 2022, President Schultz allocated about $350,000. We've not had recurring funding for marketing since 2008. And that goes back to the Great Recession of 2008. From about 2000 to 2008, the university had a pretty robust ongoing regular budget around marketing. Folks who've been around for a while really think about those times and reflect on some of the really beautiful work that was done. There was a series of really, I would say, exquisite television commercials that the university had created, very cinematic. They were running on television. We had other kinds of paid advertising across the state and around the region. But when the recession hit, the state funding dropped really precipitously. And so the institution had to make a decision. And one of the places they chose to pull back on was the investment in marketing. And we really haven't had an ongoing marketing budget since that point in time. One of the questions that comes up is, well, how much money should WSU be spending? I get that a lot from people. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but in one of our earlier sessions, but for a university our size, a public research university, we should be spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.2 million annually. And that number is, it's hard to be able to quantify that number because every institution is different. But that gives you an order of magnitude of what it is we're talking about here. So now for the update portion. Since we met in May, President Schultz has allocated an additional $750,000. We're using this combined total of 1.1 million to be able to, as I said, do two things: address those immediate marketing needs and then lay the groundwork for relaunching our marketing program. So next slide.
Phil?
Yeah.
Good. Just, but everybody doesn't think just Kirk has this magic source of money in the printing press. We received a couple significant bequests that came to the president's discretionary fund. We had talked a lot at the board about a need for investment in this area. You all have made that abundantly clear that this needs to be a priority. And so we elected to invest a large percentage of those particular monies in moving this ahead, not just because the board suggested it, but we also realized for enrollment, reputational analysis, all those things that we've got to be able to do this. We will continue to invest additional dollars in this. This is not, we're going to do this now and never again. But I just want, this was an elective decision strategically made by the senior leadership team at the university to invest these dollars. So I just want, there's been lots of conversation around that. Phil will go on what we're actually going to do with it. I know it's not enough, and I know we need recurring funding, but we thought if we're just going to wait for recurring funding, we're going to have the consistent, every year you all tell us the same thing, and it looks like we're not doing anything. So just wanted to give that context to some of this. So it's the printing press is shut down for a bit, and but we're going to continue to look for other ways to invest in this space.
Yeah, and I used that word investment very deliberately because I do see those as those one-time dollars as an investment to be able to address the immediate needs and to be able to position us for longer term growth. And we'll talk at the end about, so what does this all mean? But maybe go to the next slide if we could. So there are several things that we're doing in the immediate time. These are all things that we've already launched since this money has become available to address the immediate issues we have around the WSU brand and really to make sure that we can address issues around our reputation and particularly around student enrollment. So this first one is a statewide brand awareness campaign that we've launched. We've certainly, as a group, talked about this idea of WSU needing to be able to tell its story. And that's what this campaign is all about. This is how we are going about telling our story. So we have launched a monthly statewide digital campaign that, we go to the next slide. Here are the list of topics each month that we're going to cover. So the first one, we're in the second month of this process. The first topic really looked at how WSU actually impacts people's lives in the state of Washington. Next one was focusing on WSU Extension. The fact that one of the unique things about a land grant institution is we are in every county in the state. No other university in the state can lay claim to that. And we think that's an important differentiator in our service mission. Another thing we're going to be talking about next month is WSU's role in providing rural healthcare and providing healthcare to underserved parts of the state of Washington. We also have topics that include things like food safety. We're going to be doing one session or one month specifically on WSU as an emerging Hispanic serving institution. We're going to talk about the power of Coug Nation. We're going to talk about what WSU does to strengthen the economy of the state. So you don't have to just be affiliated directly with WSU to be able to receive the benefits. And then the last one we have scheduled at this point would be something around water resources. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is a digital campaign that's focused on what we refer to as outcome-based stories. So these aren't things that are future-looking. These are things that WSU is doing on the ground to impact people's lives today. The theme that we're using is Go Cougs Means. And the first one is Go Cougs means better community, Go Cougs, but we'll see those in a second. But each story goes into detail about why WSU can lay claim to this space. We're teasing that through the use of video. So we do 60-second videos for each of these stories. These are being promoted through paid digital advertising. You can see the outlets here: Seattle Times, GeekWire, Spokesman Review, the Tri-City Herald, the Columbian. We wanted to hit all the major media markets in the state. And again, this is every month we have a different story. We also are doing both organic and paid social media. And with that social media, we're specifically targeting the Puget Sound region, Olympia, where our lawmakers are currently housed. And then also we're trying to identify specific statewide influencers, being able to directly get this into their feeds. So we go to the next slide. We are collecting all of these various stories on our Go Cougs Means website. There's an example of the site now. And go to the next one. I'll give you just a flavor of what some of these videos look like. So the first one is Go Cougs Means a Better Life. If you want to play that video.
How do you make life better? Do you make food more nutritious and accessible? Do you give people tools to sleep better? Maybe you make water cleaner or wine more delicious? Do you make our world safer? Do you bring healthcare to more people, especially the most vulnerable among us? If you're Washington State University, the answer is yeah, we do that. Through research and programs, WSU does all of these things and more to make life better for the people of Washington and around the world. Better health, better sleep, better food. Go Cougs means a better life.
So again, these 60-second videos are intended to be served up via digital media. It's the teaser. We want people then to click through and be able to read the article and see what WSU does around sleep and food and healthcare and the like. Next one, I want to overdo the videos, but we'll do the next one. This is the one that we just launched currently. It's still in market right now, and this is our focus on WSU Extension.
Whatever community you call home, Washington State University is with you. We're in every county, working on the things that matter locally and statewide. We're in schools, helping teachers help their students. We support small farms and farmers' mental health. We're master gardeners. We bring 4-H to Washington. We partner with small towns on tourism and development. We help connect rural areas to resources through high-speed internet. WSU Extension is the university's front door, translating knowledge and innovation into hands-on solutions. For the people of Washington, WSU Extension is with you. Go Cougs means community.
Thank you. Next slide. So next campaign that we have underway is what I'm referring to as the WSU Achievements Campaign. And the intent of this is to take 4 to 5 major research accomplishments, academic accomplishments, or philanthropic achievements over the course of the year and really do what I would call sort of the full court press. By that, I mean doing extensive work around earned media. Whenever we have an announcement to make in this area, we're working really diligently to make sure that we get coverage, particularly in the Seattle market. So because these aren't necessarily happening in Seattle, there's work we need to do behind the scenes with assignment editors to make sure that when video is captured by an affiliate station, say in Tri-Cities or Pullman or wherever the story might be coming out of, that they understand that we want them to really try and sell this to their affiliates in Seattle. So far, we've had great luck, which frankly, I've been surprised at how lucky we've been able to get that coverage in Seattle, but this has been really very helpful. I'll go to the next slide. So in addition to doing the earned media, which is great, we also are putting quite a bit of effort behind paid media, so behind advertising. In this case, we're not just doing digital advertising, we're also doing print. So on each of these achievements, we've done full page ads in the Seattle Times. We've got some print advertising in some of the other publications we've got listed here. And again, putting money behind social media as well. So not only organic, but also paid to make sure that this story shows up in people's feeds. Excellent. The other thing that we're going to do to extend this campaign, which is something I'm excited about because this is not something we've done certainly since I've been at WSU, is really try and take this nationally and in particular focus on the higher ed audience. There is, as I said, concern about WSU's reputation nationally and particularly among the sort of academic sector. And so we want to be able to share these achievements with the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed as a way to promote WSU among other universities, other academic leaders nationwide. So a lot of other universities are doing this. This is not something that we have dabbled in. And so I'm happy that we've got some funds to be able to allow us to start doing this as well. So next slide. So here's an example of one of the achievements that we spotlighted. As you recall, the Boeing company made a very generous gift to WSU, to College of Engineering, which is great. But the story we really were trying to highlight is Boeing is the largest and longest running corporate partner with WSU. It's been almost 60 years. So for more than half a century, they have been supporting WSU. So we wanted to use this campaign as a way of saying thank you to the Boeing company, but also really to promote the fact that we had a good, strong partnership with them. Here's some examples of some of the digital ads. As I said, we also had a full page ad in color in the Seattle Times, as well as other outlets using the same design. Next slide. I'm going to do one more video. Let's play this video. So the other thing we did is to really promote this partnership with Boeing is we had put together a story around WSU's expertise in sustainable aviation fuels. And we wanted to take the interest that people had on our connection with Boeing and really talk about WSU's strength in the aviation industry, and in particular around sustainable aviation fuels.
Washington State University, we're serious about confronting climate change by letting knowledge take flight. WSU scientists from 8 programs in 3 colleges on 2 campuses are researching alternative airplane fuels. Wood waste, corn husks, cooking oil, and even our trash can be made into sustainable aviation fuel. That's SAF. Using SAF will help reduce the environmental impact of air travel because a round trip from Seattle to Paris generates more CO2 than the average person does in a year in many countries. It's not going to be easy, but WSU is up to the challenge. Our researchers are already working on energy sources, supply chains, logistics, transportation, policy, jobs, costs, and testing, and even more testing. Because at WSU, we're looking toward a better future by letting knowledge take flight.
So another example, this is hopefully an announcement we can make later this month. WSU will be responsible for the very first pediatric residency program in the state of Washington, east of the Cascades. This is important because there's a shortage of doctors in every field, but particularly in pediatrics, it's a really dire situation, and particularly in rural and sort of the eastern half of the state. And so the idea that WSU can partner with a local hospital and be able to create this pipeline of pediatric physicians is going to benefit the entire region, because, you know, generally speaking, when someone does their residency in a certain area, it's not at all uncommon for them to decide they're going to stay in that area. So we could see an increase in care for families and their children because of this work. This is, like I said, hopefully we're going to be able to make the announcement. We're going to have a better sense by tomorrow or Monday, but it will definitely be one of the achievements that we want to capitalize on when we can make the public announcement. So,
Bill, before you move on, not about this, the Boeing one, for example, it's not just our team does this, and I think that's critical. We work with those other partners, and that's not the kind of thing that we do overnight. And I think before we move from this, I want you to touch on that, because people say, well, just get the marketing team, you got the money, go do it. It's really a joint thing. And for some of these, it could be joint between 3 parties, not just 2, when we actually do the announcement and do the media and marketing campaign.
yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think there is, I think Marty can attest to the fact that there's a lot of work that goes into preparing a campaign, particularly if you need to get approvals from another entity. And in the case of this pediatric residency program, there will be, I think, 4 different players involved. And so timeframes are typically short. We want to get these in the market as quickly as we can. So yes, it does require a lot of work from our staff and great cooperation with our partners. Certainly Boeing was actually really wonderful to work with. Anyway, it was nice to be able to work with them and have them really want to make sure that we were able to share this news and that they could get the thank you that they deserved. So next slide. So this is the third area we're doing. This is specifically around spending additional dollars that we have now to be able to address the issue around student recruitment marketing. Saichi talked about the work that he was doing, but again, there was a lot of overlap, and I wanted to go into a little bit of detail about some of these. So some of these were things that were very situational. WSU went to the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl this year, the football team did. So we wanted to capitalize on that as an opportunistic situation. And so we actually ran both an awareness and an apply now campaign in the LA market. As Saichi mentioned, California is an important market for us. There's a lot of students there. But I can tell you that every institution, at least probably west of the Mississippi, is also looking at California. So it is a very competitive market for prospective students. But we thought with the attention that the football team was earning in that LA market, we take advantage of that and like I said, do both an awareness as well as an apply now campaign. Another campaign we have underway is geofencing. This is a pilot project where we are doing geofencing around 300 schools in the state of Washington. So if you travel within a certain geographic circumference of that high school, you will be served up ads encouraging you to apply to Washington State University. Again, it's a pilot. Our hope is that we can expand that. If we see that to be successful, we can expand it beyond just the 300 that we've targeted initially. Another thing that we have done is we've been able to expand our system-wide financial aid campaign. We heard that financial aid is a concern for students, and we've talked about this at the Regents before. It's sad and ironic that the state of Washington is one of the most generous states in the union providing aid to students. And up until at least the last couple of years, we were 48th or 49th in the country for people completing the FAFSA, which is the document you need to create in order to be able to find out what those opportunities are for funding. So we recognize that we really needed to hit that idea around making sure people filled out the FAFSA and to understand that WSU as a public institution is a lot more affordable even than most people think. I mean, I talked about research being done around affordability. One of the questions that a lot of these surveys ask is, well, how much do you think it costs to get a 4-year degree? And people typically wildly overestimate that if they're talking about a private or a public university versus a private. I think we've all seen those headlines about people who incur tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt by going to a private institution. That's not the situation for public, and certainly not the situation for WSU. So we've done a lot of work around this idea of affordability. One is we've built a brand new affordability website that has a tuition estimator for students, so they can get an idea practically how much money is it going to cost me to go to WSU. It sort of drops the veil, removes that mystery from it, so people can see in black and white how much they should expect to have to pay based on their family situation. The other thing we did to try and promote this website is we created this affordability video. Saichi mentioned it. Kyle, if you wouldn't mind running it again, it's only 60 seconds, but.
You really want to go to Washington State University, but costs can be daunting. Where can you find the money? Here are 3 ways. 1. Complete the free application for federal student aid. It all starts here. When you submit the FAFSA, you become eligible for all kinds of assistance like grants, work study, state-based aid, and federal student loans. There's a Washington State version too if you can't use the FAFSA. 2. Apply for scholarships. There are scholarships of all types, more than 700 just at WSU. 3. Make a plan. The WSU Financial Aid Estimator can give you a clear idea of the cost, and WSU has advisors that can help too. Bottom line, take a few steps and you're on your way to becoming a Coug.
These ads are running on Instagram and at Facebook, and the call to action is to visit the WSU affordability website. And as I said, take advantage of that financial aid estimator tool so that you can get a real sense of what the cost will be, and you can see if it's actually affordable for your family. Another thing that we spent a lot of time and effort on is something that Saichi mentioned, which is this idea of what we refer to in sort of in the industry is yield and melt. So talked about the fact that we have a lot of students who are applying, which is great. The next step is we need to accept them. Then they need to accept us. That's that idea of the confirmation. So that's that yield. We will admit more students than we ultimately have come to the university, but we want to get as many of those students as we admit to accept us. So that's the yield part. The other part is what's referred to as melt. So even after somebody has said, yes, I'm committed, I'm coming to WSU, not everybody finds their way to their campus in the fall. That's called the melt. And particularly this year, because we've got a larger pool of potential applicants, we need to put a lot of focus on making sure that those students know that we want them. We've talked about what is it that helps students make that decision. I think that personal, well, first of all, that sense that we want you to be part of the Cougar family. People want to feel part of the organization. And so that's one of the things we need to focus on. And we need to focus on that idea of customization and personalization. Saichi talked about some of those one-on-one opportunities we're making. Those are the kinds of things that seal the deal. As we talked about, this is a weird kind of sales proposition when you compare it to other kinds of selling that you might do from a marketing perspective. It is both a very intellectual but also a very emotional decision. So we need to make sure that they understand what we want them. A couple things that we're going to be launching in the fall. Again, some renewed effort around FAFSA and then the Washington version for those people who can't fill out the FAFSA. So fall of 2023, we've got a campaign that's ready to launch. We're also going to do quite a bit of work on a campaign that the Washington Achievement Council. Thank you. Yes, it's a statewide campaign that encourages middle school students from lower incomes to make a pledge to say, I'm going to take a college prep track in high school, and if I graduate with a certain GPA, I will be granted tuition at a public institution, and I'll receive funding for fees and books. This is how we fill our pipeline, and this is how the state of Washington ultimately gets more college or more residents earning college degrees. This is again something we've talked about, is to get a state that values education as much as Washington does has a really low percentage of people who get their four-year degrees here. So we're going to put some effort into really trying to promote this with middle school parents, making sure that they don't make those decisions in middle school. If they assume that college is unaffordable and it's not for them, they could make choices that make it more difficult for their child to actually apply after they complete high school. So I'm looking forward to being able to work on that program. The other thing that we put a lot of effort on is something that Chair Dickinson talked about, which is the student experience. What is it like when you go to the WSU website if you're a prospective student? Is it easy for you to figure out what you need to do? The answer was no, it really was not. Not up until recently, when you went to wsu.edu, it was essentially a Pullman website with links to 5 other campuses. That's not who we are as a system. So we completely retooled the WSU homepage. We created a separate WSU Pullman homepage, and we really focused on working on the WSU Pullman admissions page. We wanted to really streamline that so that it was very easy for students to understand what the process looked like through admissions. Our hope is that we will be able to use the Pullman admissions page as a template so that the other campuses can make those changes when it's appropriate for them as well. So let's go to the next slide. So those were the things, those are the blue tarps and the buckets, the emergency repairs. Now let's talk about how we replace that roof. We've got money available that we're using to be able to do a couple things that set us up for long-term success. You'll go to the next slide. So first thing we're doing is investing in some really, fortunately, basic fundamental foundational tools, things that we have not had at our disposal in the past. One is we now have a search engine optimization tool. That is Marketing 101.
One might call that just basic table stakes.
Yes, table stakes is a good way to
As much as
describe
we're
it.
excited that you have search engine optimization tool.
Yes,
We would have needed that maybe 10 years ago.
Absolutely, yes. So we were able to invest in a tool now, also able to invest in quarterly media impact reports. Our lack of data around marketing is really makes it really challenging for us because everybody's operating on their gut and everyone has a different perspective on things. We need data to be able to tell us where is the WSU reputation, where is perception not meaning reality, what segments of our audience have those perceptions that we need to address. Again, basic table stakes, it's basic, as they would say in football, I think blocking and tackling, and so the good news is we're going to be able to get quarterly impact reports on how our earned media is working. We are actually just looking at the Q4 media impact reports. I can tell you that we had a situation at the end of December. If you remember, we had a student who was arrested on December 30th. Between December 30th and December 31st, the negative press that we got from just those 2 days has significantly impacted our media quality scores. I think Q1 is going to be particularly challenging as well, but that is a metric that the president I know shares with the regents. And so I'm just going to forecast for you that we may have a challenge to hit the goals that we were hoping to from a media quality index. Another tool that we're looking to invest in is a video asset management tool. We know that video is really a critical medium to talk to students, prospective students and their parents. And so we just need the ability to be able to know where all that footage is and be able to access it in a timely manner. Then the last thing we are doing is investing in a project management tool. Again, I would say this is sort of table stakes from a marketing perspective, that you have marketing applications that help you manage all these different projects. You know where your assets are, you know what your deadlines are. So excited to have those foundational tools to be able to help us relaunch this program. Next slide. And then finally, we are investing in a multi-year brand marketing strategy. The initial investment the president made allowed us to go out for a request for proposals to find a marketing firm that will help us do this work. We had 19 firms nationwide who applied. Just today, we finally received a notice, I guess, that we can announce who our successful bidder is. We've hired a company called BVK out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They have a lot of deep experience, not only with higher education, but particularly with higher ed systems. I think we are an interesting hybrid system. We're different than a lot of other institutions. So it's going to be really helpful to be able to have BVK help us navigate that. And there's sort of 4 major deliverables that we're looking for from this agency over the course of the next probably about 9 months. I think hopefully by the end of the calendar year, their work will be complete. First and foremost, I mentioned this before, we need good qualitative market research on the WSU brand. We need to do a brand health audit. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? And we need that as a benchmark so that we can really identify if we're making changes and if our efforts have been successful. That's going to be something we need to invest in on a regular basis every couple of years, be able to reproduce that kind of market research. And this is research that is going to not only benefit us from a marketing perspective, it's clearly going to benefit, I think, enrollment management. It's going to help student affairs. This is, again, basic stuff that we really are going to be able to take advantage of. It's going to be very helpful. Another thing we want to do is to put together a messaging platform for each campus and for the system. As I said, because we are one university, you get one degree, a WSU degree. It's not a WSU Tri-Cities degree or a WSU Pullman degree. That makes us very different. So we need to be able to make it really clear about what is it about the Tri-Cities campus versus the Everett campus versus the Vancouver campus. What is it unique about each of those campuses, and why would a student want to go to one place or the other? There's lots of reasons, lots of factors that go into play when you just decide, when you're trying to decide what campus to go to. And so we want to make sure that we've got common language that we're using to talk about the advantages of each of our campuses and then the advantage of the WSU system as well. Another thing is we're going to be asking them to help us prepare a long-term roadmap to build our brand awareness and our reputation. Over the next 3 to 5 years, what does that plan look like? Assuming that we can secure recurring funding if we're going to execute this. This is going to be, again, very, very helpful, particularly for communicators on the campus level as they're thinking about how is the work that they're doing to promote their individual campus going to ladder up to the work that's being done at this system. And then finally, we've talked about this before as well, but we need to make sure that all this brand marketing work is really tightly integrated with the work that we're doing around enrollment marketing efforts. Because enrollment, I talked to this group before about this, any dollar I get that I can spend on marketing, I'm spending on recruiting prospective students. Now we can sort of broaden that out a little bit more and really focus on the institutional brand. But again, we need to make sure there's that tight integration. Next slide. So what does this all mean? Again, these funds are one-time only. They're a great start. We do need to look at sustainable funding in order for us to be able to execute this brand marketing strategy. One of the questions is, well, how much money do you need? One of the things we're going to ask our agency to help us do is to say, scope out this long-term plan and then put dollars next to it. So we have a good, solid number that we know that we're looking at. So what are the benefits of marketing? Why should we be doing this? Well, first, I think it's going to have a positive impact on our revenue. Tuition revenue, we know, is about 50% of our operating. That's really critical. This work lays the groundwork. It sort of plows the field in advance of those development officers going out and making requests to potential donors. And the other thing too is I think it can have benefit both at the state and federal level with federal and governmental support. If we do not have a good reputation, we're not a place where state or federal agencies want to invest. And so we need to make sure that we reinforce that and make WSU look like a good partner to invest in. The other thing is it's going to have benefit to our reputation. We talked about rankings. We also talked earlier today about faculty recruitment. I think that money is a concern when we're hiring faculty, but also the reputation of the institution they're going to. Is this going to reflect positively on their career if they come to work for WSU? So let's see. Next slide. So before we jump into discussion, the question is then how do we get from where we are now to where we want to be? And I think there's a couple things for us to keep in mind. One is we need to, particularly as WSU launches its new budget model, this will be an opportunity for us to talk about how are we going to invest institutionally in marketing. That's a little ways away. So how do we bridge that? I think one of the things that actually Chair Dickinson and I had a conversation about earlier was, is there an opportunity for us to go to philanthropic donors and see if they'd be willing to provide us with startup funds to be able to bridge from where we are today to a place when we can start covering these costs institutionally. It's not an unknown kind of approach. University of Oregon, I want to say back in probably 2015, 2016, had a donor who contributed $5 million to be able to help that institution launch its new brand. And again, I think that money allowed them to bridge until the institution was able to cover their costs of ongoing marketing. So I think that's something that we can look at as a way of potentially getting us set up for success so that the institution hopefully will be able to, as we increase student enrollment, we've got more tuition revenue, and we've got more money that we can invest into the institution. So I'll stop there and open up for discussion, questions.
Who produced the spots?
We did those all in-house. That's a great question. A lot of times if you were to buy those from a freelancer, they would be very expensive. We have a small budget. We've got a very small team, honestly. We have one person right now who's working full-time as our videographer. We had a team of 3 and we lost all 3 of them during COVID. So we're relying on some freelancers to help, but we're doing the scripting. We have a student we're using to do our vocal talent. We're doing it all ourselves.
Bootstrapping the whole thing.
What's that?
You're bootstrapping your entire.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm glad you asked this question because the financial aid, the affordability video, that animated video, that was done by our art director, Jackson Price. And I need to give Jackson a shout out because that was really good stuff. I mean, if we bought that kind of motion graphics, I don't know what the cost would be, but he literally created all those images. And then the team created the script and we had the student record it for us. We've got a good team. They just need the resources to.
Can you put those spots in Spanish?
Pardon me?
Put the spots in Spanish, produce them in Spanish.
Well, I mentioned that one of the sort of tell the WSU story segments is going to be on WSU as a emerging Hispanic serving institution. That one will be in Spanish.
Why not make all of them?
Well, I
just have a version.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different languages.
Yeah.
But obviously, I think that Spanish is an important one because it's largest ethnic group and largest ethnic group on campus.
Yeah.
So I think target those. I guess I would also say from that perspective, think about how could you do something that also targets the Native community? Because we tend to overlook them and yet we're on reservations. Yeah. So look at that strongly. I think that's good. Who's airing these in Seattle?
So these are all paid digital at this point. These are not run on
No money to
over the
do
air.
actual paid advertising.
What's that?
There's no money to do actual broadcast, right?
Not broadcast advertising. Yeah, so we're doing it as paid.
Do you have any idea of the cost to do something like that?
Well, I can probably speak to that. I just did a media buy, just in the Tri-Cities alone to run 3 TV spots every day for 10 days. And then spread that out over 4 months. It cost me $123,000 just for the Tri-Cities market. So you would probably at least double that for the Seattle market.
Yeah. And not to put too fine a point on it, but that's just the media buy. That's not the.
Yeah,
cost
that's
of
not the
producing
production.
spots.
Right.
Yeah.
But then again, if you're producing your own spots, you
Yeah.
offer it to them. You save yourself money, which can be done.
Yeah.
And hey, go in there and institutional cooperation. I did a series of spots for El Centro de la Raza in Seattle. and keener them. We produced, and may not have been the greatest time slots, but the thing is that we got a pro bono. So, and we hit the nonprofit part of it really hard. So I think about that and how we could do that, and particularly in Western Washington, where we really want to target, if there's possibility to do those things. So,
And using perhaps some of your connectivity of how to navigate that a little
Yeah.
bit, right?
yeah. I thought the production of those were,
I did too. The quality of them I thought were excellent.
yeah, having a student voice it.
Yeah. I think the student does a nice job.
Do. The pediatric thing is really, I think, an important one. And again, a Spanish version to that, I think, would be very important. Great idea. The other question I had is that, and I know we're talking about your brand and imaging, but I think another part of this is very important, and we've had this discussion, is getting Kirk out there on the road to and connect him, to talk about the issues that higher education is facing, and from enrollment to all those things. But somebody has to be in a position to book it.
Right.
It's got to be the booking agent type of thing. Is there somebody that could do that?
I think an eager team. Yeah, Phil and I will talk about that. We do have somebody in Seattle that I think would be in a position to assist with some of this type of work. So.
And the president and I have talked about this idea of a thought leadership campaign. I agree with you. I think Kirk is a great asset for the institution. And to the extent that he can be the face of WSU, particularly on the west side, I think that's something we need to look at. I would
I'll
say.
make a list of what programming that you would target, as far as programs, not just on the TV side, but on the the radio side of things, and what are you pitching to them? What's the hook there for them to want to have them on? And I think there's a lot of stuff, but I think that would be good because it's, again, getting him out there, which I think is important, which can help in every other aspect, but also in the universities and presence out there. The other thing is that we get a pretty good basketball team, a women's team that just, and I was just blown away by watching them, after they won the championship and the post-game coverage and all of that. Yeah, you get these two shining stars with Ledger Walker and Bella. They got great stories, and I would try to use them because you're not only going to get regional coverage to that, but I think you can get national stuff. But there's more of a story about why did they come to WSU? Obviously they play basketball, but they came from another country. And then their stories behind that are great stories. And then Bella's got the Wanda connection, which is, I think, a great story too. So, and you can tie that with, they came to WSU. So anyway, think about that.
So Brett, next up.
So you can see the challenge. First of all, congratulations to the team. I enjoyed the presentation. But when you present to this board, since a lot of us have acted in your wheelhouse at some point in the past, you get a lot of wordsmithing. And I like the strategic thought, but Enrique mentioned hook. And what's the hook? So open to some suggestion on the video spots that I saw. They were fantastic on endorsing the university, but a little shy on the hook of, like, instead of dreams take flight, how about your dreams take flight? Tying it, if the idea is to get enrollment up, we got to make them think that they can do that and they want to do that here. And those are some small thoughts I had of, come join us, come be a part of this. If you're going to change, come here, you change the world. Not we are. I mean, you can. I think that would be an added benefit to that kind of campaign.
And I didn't show any of the sort of either the awareness or the Apply Now campaigns, but those definitely have that language. When we're talking to you as an
Yeah,
individual,
that's awesome.
as opposed to the more brand focused work that's talking about the institution to a broader audience. But I definitely hear you. I think from a philanthropy perspective, that's one of the things we talk about a lot is people, you need to be talking to the individual, not about what they can do to support or further the goal as opposed to what the institution can do for the donor.
Have you worked with Kurt Spanish? Yeah.
Regents gonna help about that.
Got that now.
Other feedback?
Yeah, not really feedback, just a fun fact. One of the videos featuring previous ASWC president, WSU Tri-Cities president, Natalie Mendoza came across my TikTok feed just the other day. So they're excited.
That's great.
I would,
Yes, Doug.
I'd say, President Schultz, good job on your discretionary funds. I think that was a wise investment. But it does bring up the question of what we have been spending just in general toward this, because it's pretty obvious by your report. Well done, by the way. I would hope philanthropic dollars might be there, but it's probably not the first time you thought of that, or even maybe made an ask in that regard. But kind of our resolve institutionally to support marketing, you know, and the benefit from that. You have to measure that, of course, what you're doing. But I would hope from here that this could be sustained, that number gets at least up there where our peers are.
For your benefit, I probably should have shared. I shared this in some of our previous meetings when we talked about this, but to put things into perspective, I was able to cobble together around $250,000 to $300,000 a year for marketing. And again, all that money was going to student recruitment. So there was no brand marketing for the institution. So it gives you a sort of an order of magnitude. We have not had a lot of money available to be able to put into marketing.
Did your crew enjoy producing those spots?
What's that?
Did your staff people enjoy producing the spots? Because it's something that's, you know.
They actually, that's a very astute question. They loved it because this is the chance. I mean, the term I keep thinking of is sort of unleashing their talent. You know, this was their chance to really be able to show. I mean, I talked about Jackson and the work he did with that animated video. It's like, this was his chance to say, I'm a top performer here. Let me show you what I can do. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think they are very proud of the work. And these are all, I would say, we're learning each month. We're only into month 2. We continue to make tweaks on the, as you would with any good campaign. But yes, I think they very much like to be able to not only be able to be creative, but also really it touches sort of all aspects of the work that we do on the marketing and communication side. So we've got writers who are working, we have videographers, we have web folks, we have people who are preparing the stories. So everybody has a role to play in this. It's very much a team effort. And again, it is very much a package. I was just showing the videos that the stories are very much written in a marketing voice, meaning this is not a scientific paper. This is something that really everyone can kind of understand, and it makes it really clear, I think, to Regent Blankenship's point. We want to present the information in a voice that people get the point, they understand what we're trying to communicate, and we do it in a way that is really accessible.
Regent Powell.
Do you have an advisory committee?
The short answer is no. There was a period of time early on when I had I sort of referred to as a kitchen cabinet in Seattle. Really just to get, we have some WSU grads who have been very successful in the marketing and communications fields, and they sort of served as advisors. But one of the things that I think that we need to do, I know we will do as part of this work with BVK, is to have an advisory council that includes strong representation from faculty, representation from students. We're also going to need, I think, have alumni and perhaps donors as well on that.
Well, I'm just thinking about the whole concept of possibly bringing in donors who would be interested in boosting WSU through that. And, you know, the academic departments all have their advisory committees and that type of thing. But it just occurred to me, I mean, in the work that I do as liaison to the foundation, there's a couple of people on the foundation board who obviously have strong marketing skills, one in particular I can think of. And it just, and if you actually consider doing something around that and involving some of our alumni, maybe even a little bit broader things, so they really get themselves engaged on a periodic, regular basis. It may be a way to open the door to, and get them to perhaps suggest that we, wrap something like that into the campaign. So, that's one concept. The other thing that and like others, I thought the videos were very well done. One of the things that I thought I might see but didn't is something about the high percentage of students that we have who don't pay any tuition. The fact that we provide internships for our students so that they come out career ready. The fact that we have a very high percentage of students and a diversity of population. So those are just some of the key points, that I thought of that, and I know you target different audiences, but what it got me thinking about was, as things that we can use in schools as we go around the state, and maybe having video clips that include some key talking points like that, which might touch the student who thinks, oh, college isn't for me because I could never afford it. Nobody's ever gone, and we have a lot of first-gen students. So I was just sort of thinking about things like that. The other thing is this, the college, Washington College Fund is so powerful. Somebody can have a household income, family of 4 and 65,000 and go to school for free. And if the legislation passes, they can do it for 6 years. It's just, there's a lot of things which might actually, with people that you have in-house that can create, really good videos on basically on a shoestring. But it might, some of these things just might be able to spark some kids.
Yeah.
Come to us.
The comment about those facts about WSU are things that are reflected on that affordability website. I was really proud of the team's work they did on that. I was trying to think about how I could have shown that here, and that was way too in the weeds. I probably showed you more videos than I should have, but one of the things I really liked about the way that they did that, and if you ever get a chance to look at it, I really encourage you to take a moment, because it is in very sort of plain spoken language, almost like having a conversation with people. And it talks about the fact that about a third of our students graduate with no debt, a third don't pay anything at all. The third that do end up having to pay, I think it's something in the neighborhood of about $20,000 for their 4 years or for their 4-year degree. And so it is much more affordable. And again, the team created a website that is very, very different than any kind of website we've done before. It's very conversational, really intended for people who may not have a lot of experience working in higher ed. They may be the first in their family to think about going to school. And so we really wanted to think about who the audience was and really remove any barriers or friction that made it difficult for people to continue through. It was a very well done page, and it really does try to drive home those points.
Okay, John,
Can I say one
well,
last
John
thing?
has his hand up, and then he's hand up there. Well, then we'll come to Enrique.
Go ahead, Enrique. Go
No,
first.
I was only going to say that the one thing that I didn't see in these is that something that's more personal, a student about why WSU, or an alumni that said, why did I go to WSU? How did it change your life? And just that personal thing that I think people can connect to and understand. And those things always, I think they're best ways to tell a story. You know, it's that personal feeling and dialogue that you have with somebody. So that's
Thank
the
you.
only thing I would suggest.
John, we'll have you comment. Regent Shower has a comment, and I'd like to make a couple closing comments just around real intent of the outcome we'd like to get to here today. So turn it back to you, John.
Yeah, thank you. So Phil, I thought it was a great presentation. Of course, I had the opportunity to preview before today's meeting as well. I just, during your presentation, went to Instagram and I hit the follow button on a number of different Instagram feeds that there are out there for WSU. And I think it'd really be interesting to lean into more of the social media. You know, we have to think about where's our customer, where are they spending their time? I don't know that a lot of them are reading a lot of the Seattle Times and other things like that. Maybe their parents are, but I think we have to go where our customer is and lean into that and market to them in some of those forums. Anyway, I look forward to working with you and the team further on this throughout the year. Thanks.
I know we're out of time, but if you don't mind, I would like to comment about one particular social media platform that I think WSU literally is a national leader in, and that's with TikTok. In fact, our social media strategist, Brent Reeser, was invited to serve on a panel by the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities just last Friday, because WSU is more closely integrated with using TikTok to reach prospective students than really any other institution. He spoke to APLU on Friday this last summer. He also, I can't remember, there was another national conference he was asked to present at regarding how WSU is using TikTok to recruit students. And I won't go into the weeds, but there's some certain things about TikTok that make it a very appealing platform. The APLU conference on Friday was talking about the fact that many states have banned the use of TikTok. And so Brent's purpose on the panel was to talk about why TikTok is a tool that higher ed should be using if they aren't, and if they still have the ability to use it. So we'll see what happens to that particular platform. But right now we find it to be one of our most effective social media channels to reach prospective students.
So I just want to make a couple of quick comments. You have done a phenomenal job with very limited resources and a board that wants to obviously be very involved in helping, which I'm sure
Every marketer loves that.
you appreciate. And I really want to thank our president for investing. And I want to thank you for continuing to show up and be in this space with us to really help us to understand how we can move forward and what you need. I have heard in various meetings, how do we activate as Regents? What is the way in which we can help best support the university? And I'm hearing this idea and this concept of how we utilize philanthropy. And in my mind, I'm thinking the case for Go Cougs, right? So how do we outline, exactly what we would be asking for our donors to say yes to? And it feels like a pretty easy ask in my mind. And I appreciate Laura's comment about maybe activating some of the folks that typically are in advisory groups and testing the feasibility of that. But I really like for each of us here to think about how we can activate our networks to tangibly support what you need. The number of staff that you have and the budget that you have will not achieve what this board is continuing to say. We'd like to see more storytelling. And can you do this with this video? Every video takes a significant amount of time to conceptually think about, storyboard, and produce. And so I just think that it's important that we all understand how much you've achieved with so little and that we can't keep asking for that. So what will each of us do to show up and be supportive of what I think is going to be an ask outside of our public system, or can we cobble together more money? And so I think as we, kind of wrap up this session, I'm hoping that can be the call to action in this room. How will we be able to show up and help you fund this?
Thank you. That was very well said. And I just would echo Regent Shower's comments because it was my, Phil and Holly want to say thank you to Holly as
Yes,
well and acknowledge Holly.
I was remiss in not calling
Yeah.
Holly out because really all this work is because of her.
She is one heck of a powerhouse that is her capacity to produce is very, very high. But I think the intent of our discussion hopefully today was one, when we have met offline and spent quite a bit of time, I want to acknowledge that you have heard us and you have stretched as far as you're probably able to stretch a team of 3 for an institution of this size with, as you just heard, a marketing budget that I just spent essentially in the Tri-Cities to just buy some TV and digital and billboard space. So the intent today, you guys, as a board is to, I guess, have a very clear discussion, and maybe we come back to this around, are we as a Board of Regents seeing this as one of our top priorities, our brand reputation, how that peels in and has a ripple impact to our philanthropic fundraising, to our enrollment, and to ultimately the bottom line revenue of Washington State University. If that indeed is what we want to stand behind, as yes, it is a top priority, then we need to really be able to communicate that clearly to Kirk. And couple with that, how are we as a board going to work with Kirk and Phil on a plan to generate funds through various means that can create a sustainable plan? And I think the hiring of BBK is outstanding. Your process was very, very good on that. And I'd like to understand next steps here, Phil, around timing, because what BBK produces for you around a baseline of what our brand reputation actually is I think we're going to probably have a moment of like a little bit, right? So that might be what gets our attention to maybe finally say, okay, as a board, we are expecting and have a significant expectation of our president taking this as a top priority for 2023, 2024, and we want a $5 million number tied to it. And how are we going to get there? I don't think you can kind of pull, I've never found the ability to pull, the money out of the turnip. So we also have to work with Kirk on understanding what can we do to help you do that and create some funding. But getting in the weeds of the videos and the messaging is awesome, but that for this board, I want us to come back up here and is this a strategic initiative? Do we feel it is important enough that we need to put the board behind it? We talk a lot about it. It's fun to talk about where and how to lean in and what to be saying, but we need a different kind of high level. This is it. We are behind our brand and behind our reputation. So I think I would like to say, again, a huge thank you on behalf of the board of directors. The quality of work, and Enrique and I were talking about this, so I think we both were just so pleased that we were wondering, I wonder if he's like using some of the resources, within the talent of your School of Communications and video. And so kudos to knowing how to go leverage that. And to me, that is what WSU is about. So the more organic it is, I think the better we are in that, and it represents who WSU is. But we have so many good ideas, but when there's 3 people and you're 1 leak away, as you are finding out every day, from literally being completely drenched for a week. So a story comes out and Phil is completely derailed. So now there's just 2 people in marketing because there's a crisis management person managing communication. That's Phil. And we all want messaging, and Kirk needs messaging, and got to respond to media. We're trying to do, quick plug the dike as fast as you can. And so we're down to 2, and we are consistently down to 2 and have been for several years with the crisis that we have been dealing with. The magnitude of it is so massive. And I just want to pause for a second because the magnitude of the crisis you have been dealing with are so heavy in nature, as well as to the faculty and leadership of WSU. These are heavy, heavy things. And you're just expected to, you have to, right? The ship keeps going. but I want to acknowledge that we understand the weight in what you are trying to hold up some days with really hard topics. And all of you, from Ellen Taylor to just when it comes to students' well-being and all of it, it's massive. So that being said, I will, as an action item for the future, I think we will take this offline and we will look to the next steps around how we want as a board to identify this as a priority. What we would like from you is identification of what is the number? What does that look like for the next 5 years? Maybe Kirk and Phil, you guys work on that. And we can back in with action items through BBK's outcomes of their plan. And there's ways that we could go raise money to say, hey, for this particular campaign, would you like to underwrite that and sponsor that? And you might find corporations that want to do that, right? So we could break it out in a multitude of ways, but looking for you guys to guide us on the best way to approach that. So that's kind of my closing comments. Anything else, just on behalf of Regent Shetler, before you close out? Phil.
I would just want, just a forecast for this group. I mentioned BDK is the firm that we selected. We will be in touch with all of you in the very near future because BDK does obviously want to hear from the Board of Regents about what your priorities are, what kinds of things you think WSU needs to be communicating about over the next 3 to 5 years. So that will be part of their discovery phase, and that should be, we're going to try and schedule that as quickly as we can.
Great, thank you. Okay, Regent Shetler, we'll turn it back to you. Kirk, anything that you want to add to this before we close out here? Regent Shetler, we will turn this back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Regents. And I'd also like to thank all of our presenters today, Executive Vice President and Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton, and Senior Vice President Provost Laura Greiner-Hill, Sachi Oba, and of course, Phil. Thank you all for your hard work on behalf of WSU and the students and the Regents in our region. We have a lot of work to do, and I know that we'll get there. So thank you all very much. So this concludes the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee meeting. And at its conclusion, I will turn it back to you, Chair Dickinson.
Thank you, Regent Shetler. That was jam-packed Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee. It goes so fast when the presentations are so good. So thank you to all three parties. We are going to take a break now. We are going to have lunch, and we will reconvene for our academic and student